All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Portland City Council. This is the Wednesday, June 5th, 2019 morning session of the Portland City Council. Good morning, Carla. Could you please call the roll?
Fish.
Here. Morning, Chloe.
Here.
Daly.
Here.
Fritz. Wheeler.
Here. And now we'll turn it over to Legal Counsel. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor. Thank you. Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. If it does not, you may be ruled out of order. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you're in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Please remain seated in council chambers unless entering or exiting. If you are filming the proceedings, please do not use bright lights or disrupt the meeting. Disruptive conduct such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Thank you very much. First up is communications, Carla.
Item 514, request of Robert Patterson to address the council regarding homelessness.
Is Mr. Patterson here today? I do not see him. Perhaps he'll come in before the end of communications. Next individual, please.
Item 515, a request of Nicholas Caleb to address council regarding fossil fuel infrastructure.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, council members and Mayor Wheeler. My name is Nicholas Caleb. I'm the staff attorney for the Center for Sustainable Economy, a nonprofit organization and think and do tank. We work primarily on climate issues in Portland, Oregon, and the United States more broadly. So over the last 6 months, the conversation around climate action has shifted because of two occurrences. First, a new report from the International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, gives us until 2030 to complete a massive carbon drawdown to keep warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. In essence, we're in a climate emergency and we've got a clock that we need to follow. Second, and partially in response to the IPCC report, climate advocates have been successfully raising the popularity of extremely ambitious economic, social, and environmental proposals that have emerged under the label of Green New Deal. As Naomi Klein puts it, we are left with a stark choice. Allow climate disruption to change everything about our world or change pretty much everything about our economy to avoid the fate. Today, we are encouraging you to be bold and take risks to create the possibility for a future worth living in. First, be bold in taking on tar sands and crude oil exports. This council is well versed in the risks of expanding fossil fuel infrastructure and has taken action in the past to prevent it. You must act boldly again. June 3rd was the 3-year anniversary of the oil train derailment in Mosier, Oregon. The same year, in 2016, City Council took numerous actions to oppose fossil fuels, including passing a resolution supporting the actions of the Standing Rock Sioux to blockade the Keystone XL pipeline, which would threaten their treaty resources, ancestral lands, natural resources, and sacred sites with tar sands oil. We must renew this commitment to all communities on the front lines of the resistance to the fossil fuel industry by stopping this project and any more like it. We need you to be disobedient alongside us in support of the climate movement when faced with the machinery that is fueling the collapse. And there are some folks in the audience, I think, who have been arrested at the Zenith facility recently, putting their bodies on the line for that. We must have a public hearing on the Zenith expansion and the threat of crude oil in Portland. We need the fossil fuel terminal zoning amendments reinstated, and we require bold city action that forecloses on any fossil fuel industry plans to turn Portland into a tar sands and crude oil export hub. Fossil fuels pose inherent risks from spills, leaks, explosions, and derailments, and we must move quickly towards safer alternatives. 2 years ago, the city passed its 100% renewable energy resolution, and an update on progress, I think, was due 3 days ago. I'm not sure what the progress is on that. It's time to, essentially, the resolution, as we read it, puts an end on the life of the fossil fuel industry in Portland. It puts a time that we can actually stop that. We should be ahead of 2050, but there's a time for us there. So the second bold step that we're asking from council today is to actually create a plan for a managed decline of fossil fuel infrastructure in Portland, to make that a community-wide plan that involves people from everywhere so that we can talk about what we want to do with formerly industrial fossil fuel lands and how we can return those to public in the future. I'm out of time, but we very much look forward to working with you on this in the future.
So Nick, if I could just quickly respond and agree. Number one, I want to be crystal clear as the mayor of this city, I do not support and will continue to oppose any expansion of oil trains going through our community. And you identified one of the situations in Mosier. There was also the derailment in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and there was the catastrophic derailment in Quebec, Canada. And my recollection is that that burned down about half of the community and it killed 46 people. That is a much more sparsely populated area than the city of Portland. Oil trains are currently going through very densely populated parts of our community, and we cannot allow this kind of activity to continue to expand in our community. I'm also, by the way, concerned about the Columbia River Gorge. My immediate concern is health, safety, and the environment within city limits, but I'm also concerned about the environmental area through which these oil trains must go. I want to let you know what I've done. I have brought together all of our city bureaus, agencies, including Metro, including DEQ, and others from around the region who have a potential role to play in helping us limit this risk. And I've also met with a group of environmentalists, and I appreciated your willingness to participate in that conversation as well. And the goal of the conversations has been basically this. We obviously do not control the railroads. Nobody here has any authority whatsoever over railroads. That is clearly the federal government's purview. But the problem that most people see is these dangerous oil trains coming with increasing frequency through the community. So the question is, given our infrastructure that we do control here at the local level and the permits that we issue at the local level and the oversight that we provide at the local level, what are the actual tools that we have at our disposal to help address this question? So you have asked for a meeting, and others have asked for a meeting, and I have asked for a meeting. And so we will have a public work session where we will invite people with different perspectives to come to the table in a public setting and put all the ideas on the table and give us the opportunity to discuss what our options are. And that, by the way, includes requirements and regulations on the actual crude oil material that's coming into our community. You've also asked today for a community-based plan, and I would encourage you at that work session to make that desire known. I would personally support it. This is really ultimately about the community, and there are trade-offs to be made here, and it should be done with the blessing of this community. But the first step and the first imperative for me as the mayor of this city is to vociferously fight the expansion of oil trains coming through our community. It is a public health, a public safety, and an environmental hazard, and that has been proven beyond any doubt. And I thank you for being here. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to ask if there were, how many other items were on your list before your time ran out?
It was mostly rhetorical. I was gonna give you the hoorah encouragement.
Is
so.
this your testimony here?
I
Someone else's.
haven't sent it in,
Okay,
but I'm happy to
great.
copy it over and
All
send
right.
it to you.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to appreciate both the mayor's leadership and really trying to help us get ahead of this because, as he has said, none of us want the kind of devastation that comes with having oil train derailments and explosions. And so I look forward to us continuing to work on this as a city so that we can continue to be the model we want to be. Thanks.
Nick, you're meeting with Amy later today, is that correct?
That's right.
On my team? Great, good. I'll look forward to hearing the
Yeah,
results.
and then I would also say just we're really thankful for the words that we were hearing today, and we're prone to showing up and continuing to make our presence known, but we are excited to see the progress and are also working on new creative approaches where the city can intervene. So happy
Excellent.
to share those.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing your thoughts.
I
Commissioner
just want to
Daly.
give a little plug for the Sunrise PDX Pedapalooza Climate Ride this Sunday. See you there.
What time and where?
Oh, okay,
For
what
people who are
time?
listening who
Well,
might
it
wanna show
begins
up.
at Southwest Park Avenue and Southwest Montgomery Street, and it starts at 11 a.m. and it ends at the Zenith property.
Very
It'll
good.
be fun. There'll be music and probably some food and other fun things. And there's also, I don't have the date in front of me. I think it might be June 18th. The Sunrise Movement and PDX is actually having a forum on the Green New Deal, and they'll have a range of speakers from, I think, Merkley and Blumenauer to some community activists who are going to be speaking around Green New Deal and a vision for the community. And that would be also a great event for folks to show up to.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate it. Carla, next individual, please.
Item 516, request of Bob Schatz to address council regarding approval to change zoning of property and how decision is affecting career. Bob Schatz.
Mr. Schatz, are you here today? Oh, come on up, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here.
Hi, my name is Bob Schatz. I've lived in Portland most of my life. My wife has lived here all of her life, and our kids were born here, and they went to the same elementary school my wife went to. So we tend to think we've been here a while. We've lived in Ladd's Addition for 27 years, and as of a few years ago, we kept asking City Council to help us out with the homeless problem, the drug addicts that were peeing on our yards, pooping in our yards, stealing our things, camping in our driveways, and with no response, no help at all. Basically, the last communication was either they go or we do. And the response I got was, we can't stop you from moving. So we moved. We left Portland. We still own a lot of property in Portland. We have rental properties. Our business is in Portland. I come into Portland every day. It saddens me to see what has happened to this city. With the trash and the graffiti, the people sleeping on the streets, it's awful. I remember Portland when there wasn't one bit of trash on the ground. I own property at 123 Southeast 97th Avenue. And I bought the property to build affordable housing. And I build, design, and manage my own property. I'm an architect and developer and property manager. I know all my tenants by name. I treat them with compassion. The goal is to build more housing for them. The City Council has approved a change to change my zoning, so I'm no longer allowed to build there. I can only build industrial. I don't know industrial. It's not my thing. I don't know what to do with it. I begged and pleaded before it happened. I testified. I came in verbally and testified. I sent emails and letters. I don't know why you have public testimony if you don't listen to us. After the zone change was made, I've been in here several times asking, can you please give me back what I bought? Because I bought this for a specific reason to build affordable housing. I don't do industrial. I've been ignored. I feel like I'm a hot potato with you guys. You just pass me from person to person, and no one can do anything about it. Mayor, I've talked with your assistant, Michelle. She was supposed to set meetings. We're supposed to meet and do something about it. After 7 attempts to communicate with her, had no response. I told her at the last response, you're just as bad as responding to me as the mayor himself, and proved me wrong by responding to this one last communication. Nothing. Last time I was here, Commissioner E. Daly, you referred me to Marshall Runkle. He could not help me. He referred me back to the mayor's office. I talked to Trayvon. He gave me the same response with, I can't stop you from moving. He sent me to Kyle. No help at all. I'm done.
So You've got the better of me because I don't know this issue, and so I can't sit here and competently tell you what the zoning issue is relative to your property. I am happy to have the conversation with you and see if there's something that can be done here.
We've
But
tried that
I
3
honestly-
times
I don't-
already.
I don't know the issue. So I'll do what I can.
That's what you've told me before, and nothing has happened. That's what several of you have told me in the past, and I've got a list of
I'm sorry,
communications
I've
of
met you
attempts.
previously,
This is my 3rd time here,
but
yes.
I have not sat down with you to discuss this
No.
issue. What I've done is I've referred you to staff who can actually connect you with the people in the Planning and Sustainability Bureau who control all of the city's zoning operations. So I don't personally do that. We have employees here who do that, but if you're feeling like you're not getting satisfaction or they're not being responsive, I'm happy to help you out. So if you could leave, I have a staff member here in the back, Mustafa, can you make sure you get the contact? I will call you personally.
That's what I've done before, it doesn't work.
Well,
Okay,
you
there's
have
a
to trust me.
difference.
You can sit here and say, I don't trust you all day long, but I'm giving you my word, I will call
Yeah.
you. I'm not guaranteeing you I can fix your problem, but I am guaranteeing you I will contact you.
You guys have stolen from me. I want back what I
Okay, well,
purchased.
All right.
now
This
you're
isn't the
moving on.
forum for
Do you want me to
this.
call you or don't you? I'd
I
be
do.
happy to do it. Great.
absolutely
Next
do.
individual, please.
Item 517, request of Max Hine to address council regarding high rate of fatal and near-fatal motor incidents on Tioga and Fessenden.
Is Mr. Hine here, please? Very good. Next individual, please, Carla. for
Item
communications.
518, request of Lee Callis to address council regarding Northeast 102nd Avenue Corridor Safety Project.
Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for letting me take some time.
You bet.
So where do I sit up?
Don't worry, we won't start till you sound, so don't feel like you have to rush too much.
Thank you, I'm not good by myself.
And Carla, while he's setting up, did Mr. Patterson come in? Is he here? I don't see him. Okay.
Is it all right if I stand?
Give
I
it-
guess, so I can do my poster.
Yeah, very good.
Okay. Thank you for letting me be here. I'm Dr. Lee Coles. I've been a dentist on Northeast 102nd for about 30 years. Vision Zero does some wonderful things for safety. They've been very successful in New York City and in San Francisco, and so they're implementing plans here. This isn't New York City or San Francisco. And apparently they feel that they don't need to get expert opinions, technical opinions, or community opinions in some of their plans. There's a plan for 102nd that's supposed to start at the end of this month to revise the roadways. We're very, very concerned, and my object in being here today is to request this be put on hold until it can be looked at by experts. So the current situation on 102nd, there are 2 lanes of traffic going each way. On 102nd and Sandy, just off there, all 4 directions of freeway meet. Most of the time, this is a very nice neighborhood, but in the peak hours, this is extremely congested, and it's not uncommon to have traffic backed up all the way to Halsey, trying to get on the freeways from all 4 directions. It's a problem. So we're going to let that sit for a minute. ODOT has a division called Crash Analysis Division. I don't know if you're familiar with it. They keep track of all the accidents, why they occurred, events, weather, type of vehicle, drivers, and they post these. For the 12-year period, 2005 to 2016, there were 253 accidents here, which actually is very low compared to most major streets. Now, more specifically on the area of congestion, right up by Sandy, there were 110 accidents. Of those, 86 of them, or 86% of them, were congestion accidents, rear ends, angle turning into other people, not yielding. They were not due to speed, they were not due to alcohol. The other concern is, of those, 76% had at least 1 injury. Now, the plan that Vision 1 has, in order to make bike lanes, they are going to make it so there's only 1 lane each direction. Now, you notice this blue line here, this is the I-205 bike lane that ODOT last year put $645,000 into for maintenance and repairs, a third of it here in Maywood Park. It's very close. But because of plans that Vision Zero has done in other places, they want to make a bike lane and cut down the traffic. We're very concerned about the congestion. So let's look at what experts have said. There are many reports that show that if you increase congestion, you increase accidents, supported by several states and the United States Department of Transportation. I talked to the CAD supervisor, do you know about this? And his response was, To my knowledge, ODOT has not published a publication about increased congestion equals increased crashes. Basically, it is the general belief and pretty firmly held in the community. You increase congestion, you will increase crashes. The real problem is these people here. This is the backbone of the community. This is why I'm here today. None of these groups had any input into this. And since the project has been done, they have not been allowed to have any input at all. They're very concerned. And in the evaluation period, they are, again, not going to have any input. So my, again, here is to ask, please put this on hold until these expert opinions, technical and community, can be put into play. And to ask you one question, what can these groups do to get your attention about this? Thank you.
Thank you.
Very well done. It's kind of hard to balance all those.
And he did it in 3
I need more
minutes as
hands.
well.
And you did it within the within the appropriate timeline. You're talking my neighborhood. This is my hood.
Oh, good.
Right. I live in East Portland. I travel that road daily. So like you, I would be very concerned if we went from 4 lanes to just 2 lanes. And I also don't know whether or not that's part of the plan.
That is the plan.
Well, the commissioner in charge of transportation, Commissioner Udaley, I would certainly want to have a conversation with her about what's going on with that. And maybe the 3 of us could have that conversation.
There have been numerous conversations with Dr. Cowles. I'd be happy to have you briefed and to have a one-on-one with you.
May I make a comment on that?
No.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your.
Anybody want to ask a question about this? I put up hoping somebody would ask a question, because I didn't say it.
Mayor,
Commissioner Daly.
time's up. Can we move on?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My understanding, thank you, sir. Appreciate the presentation.
I do have some information to pass out. I don't know if I
Okay,
can do that
yeah,
with
if you
Carla?
give it to Carla right there, and then she'll make sure we all get a copy of it. Thank you, sir, for being here. Carla, it's my understanding that Mr. Hine has shown up.
Yes, 517.
Very good. Please call 517.
Request of Max Hine to address council regarding high rate of fatal and near-fatal motor incidents on Tioga and Fessenden.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thanks for being here.
Just take a seat right here.
You bet. Just take a seat. If you could just tell us your name for the record.
Yeah, Max Hine.
Thanks.
And I live in St. John's. I live on Fessenden. The last 3 incidents that took place within a span of 2 months on Fessenden, they took place immediately outside my house. One was a man getting hit, my neighbor getting hit on his way home on his bike, and he got hospitalized and put in a wheelchair. The other one was a woman crashing into a telephone pole, and the last was an elderly woman who was fatally hit in a hit and run. But we just wanted to say from the community, there's been action, from you taken recently, and with the speed bumps and the traffic islands, and it's made an enormous difference. The difference is night and day. I recall a time when, people would be doing like topping 70 just on that strip. And there was a time when I couldn't cross the street because of the high density traffic. And it's no longer the case now, and we deeply appreciate the investment and the action taken. I have a couple of notes. We also look forward to the pedestrian traffic beacons. I understand there's some people working with Commissioner Udaley, I think, talking with you today about this. There's no single thing that's going to fix, that's going to remedy the problem. It's all these little things. I think those traffic beacons would make an enormous difference, especially for the elderly and especially for the kids. There are kids who board for school on either side of the street, have to cross, and there's also a curve where they cross to get to the public pool. So there's like a very high density of young people and elderly. I think those would make an enormous difference. I think that specifically for the last incident where that the grandmother was hit. I think those particularly would have been very effective. So we look really forward to the whole thing coming together with the traffic beacons. Thank you.
Thanks, Max, for being here.
Mayor.
Appreciate it. Commissioner Udaly.
I just,
Hey, Max?
Oh, do I stay? Oh, I stay. I'm sorry.
I wanted to thank you for coming today. I'm glad to hear that you feel like the improvements are making a difference. We're still seeing some incredibly reckless, dangerous driving on that street.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen it, but people
right.
just bypassing the traffic islands and people going the speed limit by driving down the wrong way on the
Yes.
road.
Thank you for mentioning
Which
that.
to me, and I'm doing my best to accelerate these improvements. I know the St. John's community has been waiting a long time for this, and we've seen way too many crashes and injuries and fatalities in the area. But that behavior demonstrates how we can't engineer and educate our way out of this. We need more enforcement. And that is largely outside of my scope of power. So I'm having conversations with the mayor and the mayor's office about how we can increase enforcement, because there's too many people that don't seem to care about human life driving on our roads right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Very good. Carla, have any items been pulled from the consent agenda?
Yes, we have 526, 528, 532, and 534.
Very good. Please call the roll on the remainder.
Fish.
Colleagues, item 531 today, that's part of our consent agenda, is titled Create 3 New Represented Classifications. And I wanted to, even though it's a first reading, I wanted to call this out because this is a real milestone for our city. This is part of the Access to Work program, which was established by BHR and directly inspired by the Project Search internships. The purpose of Access to Work is to facilitate entry-level job opportunities at the city for people with disabilities. These positions and the Access to Work program were created to support the city's model employer resolution. They are full-time, entry-level positions with full benefits. This program was modeled after a similar program at the City of Seattle, as well as the state of Oregon and at OHSU. A number of years ago, I had the chance to visit Seattle and see how this program was functioning, and we're in the process of replicating it. This would not happen without strong leadership at the Bureau of Human Resources. Mayor, thank you for the commitment that you've made to expand Project Search citywide and to create opportunities for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I want to just applaud this moment, because we are now creating full-time opportunities for people at the city. We have a long way to go, but I think we should be proud of our progress. Aye.
Hardesty? Aye. Udaly?
Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you for your work on that project, Commissioner Fish. Aye.
Wheeler?
Although 532 got pulled, I just want to reference it. This is an inclusionary housing project. We have effectively incentivized down the limit on this to 60% for the units that are included under inclusionary housing. This project will join 59 private sector projects in the inclusionary housing approval pipeline. That means that there is now a minimum of 398 units of affordable housing in otherwise what would be market rate housing. And so I just want to note this for my colleagues, that we are starting to see considerable movement in the inclusionary housing pipeline, and this would be just one more example. I vote aye. Consent agenda is adopted. First time certain item, please, Carla. Item number 519.
Adopt administrative rules for Chapter 2.16, Open and Accountable Elections Program.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor. Colleagues, we're excited to have finalised these administrative rules which clarify certain aspects of the Open and Accountable Elections programme. Typically, administrative rules do not have to go through Council. However, this is a high-profile programme with interest from many members on Council and the public, so we wrote into the code that administrative rules would be presented to Council. These rules have been open for public comment for about 30 days and were created in partnership with the Open and Accountable Elections Commission. Susan Motet, Programme Director of Open Accountable Elections, will run through the highlights, and Amy Sample-Ward, one of the Open and Accountable Election Commissioners, will also discuss the creation process in a lickety-split time. Really impressive.
Thank you. So with the first election cycle not having happened under this program, we took Seattle's approach when they were writing rules prior to their first election cycle of their program, which was to, rather than kind of imagining how the election cycle would play out and writing rules based on those assumptions, to actually try and write the bare minimum number of rules that we think are necessary for the first election cycle, see how it plays out, and then after that, tailor some very detailed rules to how the program is playing out in the city of Portland. The Open and Accountable Elections Code required the program to issue rules on the following topics: documentation for allowable contributions and certification, allowable and prohibited expenditures, contested elections, special elections, recounts, vacancies, withdrawals, certification, disbursement of funds, and return of unspent funds, obtaining contributions, the administration of the Open and Accountable Elections Fund, investigation and enforcement procedures, and inspection of documentation. The rules that it was decided aren't required, but would be desirable coming into this first election cycle for clarity sake would be some clarity around reporting requirements, some leniency for late reporting if there are mitigating circumstances or personal emergencies, some rulemaking around accessibility and language access, and the emergency rulemaking authority, so that if something occurs that we didn't anticipate and we want to have the agility to create a rule to deal with it, we wouldn't need to go back for council approval for a year, so that in case some of you are in the middle of an election cycle, we can keep it off your plates while it looks political or potentially improper for you to vote on something, and then bring it to you after the election's over and let you guys deliberate on it when everyone feels it's proper for you to be deliberating on such things. So it went through a 30-day public comment period. It was circulated to all commission offices for comment. It went before the Open and Accountable Elections Coalition and the Open and Accountable Elections Commission for review, and a lot of the comments and feedback were integrated into this final document. And Amy Sample-Ward, who's one of our Open and Accountable Election Commissioners, is here to discuss their review process.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Morning.
So, as has already been said multiple times, I've never experienced that before. My name is Amy Sample-Ward. Thank you for saying it so many times. I am one of 8, soon to be 9 commissioners for the Open and Accountable Elections Commission. Excited to have a full team. And just briefly to Susan's point, so the full commission did review all of the rules first. Then we created a rules subcommittee that met 3 times, 2 of those 3 times specifically to focus only on the rules section and get those hopefully true. 2, also, I think a lot of time in that meetings was spent to right-size the penalties, to ensure that programs had some integrity and fairness towards campaigns, knowing the true intent of this program and how we want these rules to support that. So after that, they came back to the full commission again at our most recent May meeting, and that meeting as a full group included discussion of language access, which does remain unresolved, but is being discussed with members of the city council, equity advocates, event hosts, et cetera. And we don't want that kind of ongoing conversation to hold up the adoption of these rules at this point, and as a commission voted unanimously at the May meeting to recommend them to adoption.
Thank you, Trevon.
And colleagues, as you can gather from that brief presentation, there's a lot of detail in these rules, so we didn't propose to walk through every one of them. They were presented to the chiefs of staff, and happy to take any questions.
Yes.
Commissioner Daly?
Thank you, and thank you for your hard work on this. I want to express my concerns around I guess item number 17, which is accessibility and language access. I am a disability advocate. I'm the parent of a child with a disability, so I would be the last person to argue against accessibility and accommodations, but I'm very concerned about the vagueness of this language. And it is, participating candidates may not participate in a debate or similar public event that isn't in a location that provides equitable access to all members of the public. Accessibility includes reasonable provision of the following: language services, removing physical barriers, providing modifications, accommodations, alternative formats, auxiliary aids, and other services that ensure access upon request at least 10 business days prior to the event. Number one, candidates don't participate in organizing events. Number two, I'm concerned that this language is going to discourage small organizations and grassroots groups from holding forums. So it may decrease overall access to public forums for candidates, and only larger, more established organizations with the funds to provide all of these things will hold forums. I'm concerned about that. And finally, the language is so vague. You know, I've been working in this arena for over 15 years, and I'm not sure what providing modifications, accommodations, auxiliary aids, and other services might entail. So I imagine that someone that doesn't have direct experience with disability would be very confused by this language. So I'm not going to offer an amendment. I just wanted to go on record saying I think it's well-intentioned, but problematic. And finally, I want to say, if the city struggles to provide these things at their own public forums, then how can we expect small organizations to fulfill them? And that if we are going to require this, we need to give, we need to provide trainings, or we need to provide some kind of information. Maybe we need to provide a fund, because some of these services could run in the hundreds of dollars for a single event.
Commissioner, thank you. This is really great. You've explained what the Commission has been struggling with, and actually they have a proposal for doing exactly what you just suggested.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
It arose from Commissioner Fisher's experience when he was running for re-election, when Philip Wolfe was also running, and Commissioner Fish decided he was not going to participate if Philip could not participate. And so that's the origin of this. As Susan and Amy both said, we agree that this needs more work. The language is recommended by the Office of Equity and Human Rights.
Yes.
We're certainly happy to. Actually, we know there's at least one other thing that we're going to be coming back with, more Open and Accountable Elections Fund over the next couple of months. So this is one that definitely we would be happy to have more discussions about.
Fantastic. And it did just occur to me, there is a difference between accommodating a candidate with a disability and accommodating members of the public. If we have candidates who have mobility challenges, who are hearing, or who are deaf, who are vision impaired, of course, every forum should have to accommodate their participation. That, I have no problem with that. It's just that, 20% of our population has some kind of disability. The smaller the organization, I think the harder it is for them to anticipate the needs and pay for them.
Right.
So, and adequately address them is often my experience, but thanks. I'm glad to hear that that is a work in progress. Okay.
May I ask a question, a follow-up to this question? Thank you, Commissioner Udaley, for raising it, and thank you for Commissioner Fritz for acknowledging that there's people working tirelessly on this issue. And it is a complicated one. And so what is the time frame for bringing back a proposal to the council to address these issues?
We were hoping to actually get it ready for you to look at today, but it's just taking a little more time than that. We would expect it would be before you within the next month or two.
Okay, so but before people start participating in the program, we're
Oh,
going to
yes,
have
for
this
sure.
nailed down.
Yes.
Okay, great. That's satisfactory for sure.
I feel like I should probably say that I do intend to use open and accountable, so I appreciate your sensitivity about not kind of creating potential conflict of interest. I'm very interested in this area. And would, welcome that conversation.
That's actually, what you said before, that's a good acknowledgement also, but the issue of the candidate, that might be something that would help us resolve this particular issue,
Yeah.
is to specify that. I certainly remember fondly Sue Stahl running when you were and I
Yes.
was. And certainly, we would want to make sure that all candidates
Yeah.
are able to participate.
And we were at forums that were really challenging for her to access, and to me, that's inexcusable. A candidate has a disability, you want to have a public forum for their race, you need to accommodate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great
Commissioner
suggestion,
Fish.
thank you.
And I'd like to be part of this discussion because my campaign last year, I learned a number of things. We were the only campaign last year that, for example, translated our website into a whole variety of languages to make it accessible to the public. That's not currently part of this requirement, but the idea was if we're going to have a campaign website, we want to make sure that we're sending a clear message to the community that it is accessible. And so at some cost, we had the website translated, and there was enough, I don't remember how many different languages, but there were quite a few, so that we were communicating with people in multiple languages. I also, it was the first forum in the campaign, and it was a forum hosted by the Democratic Socialists of America, in which there was some significant miscommunication and a lot of sort of hard feelings that came out of it. There were a tremendous number of people from the deaf community were in the audience and felt like they were being disrespected. We had a candidate on the dais who but for the fact that he brought his own translator, this would not have been a forum in which he could have fully participated. There was a big learning curve for me, and so what we said was, we won't participate in forums in which Philip is participating in, and there aren't translation services and other things. I can tell you that it didn't, to my knowledge, cause any of the conveners to drop any of the forums. And we had forums, as you know, in these things, we had a lot of forums, and some of them were very sparsely attended. Mm-hmm. But what it did send a strong signal to people about was, let's make sure it's handicap accessible. So if you're in a wheelchair or you have any kind of mobility limitation, let's make sure you can get there. As appropriate, let's make sure there's translation services and other things. If people are requesting an accommodation, let's put people on notice that these are, public forums and they have to make an effort. So it wasn't a perfect experience, but there was a lot of learning that went on. We ended up calling all the sponsors of events that were in the pipeline going forward and said, hey, I just want you to know we can't participate unless you do these minimal things. And I think to the credit of most of the sponsors, it was, again, a learning experience. It was, oh gosh, hadn't thought about that, we'll make reasonable efforts. I do think creating a fund to help subsidize some of these things is important. And the dates and the deadlines there may need to be some flexibility. What you don't want is someone gaming the system to prevent a publicly financed candidate from participating.
Yeah.
On the other hand, again, as I learned, if you don't take reasonable measures, then what you're really saying to someone who has filed that you're not going to be treated as fairly and seriously as other candidates, and that's unacceptable. And that was the gist of my concern, that we not have publicly financed candidates that are participating in forums where other people are prevented from fully participating and the law from being enforced. So I'd like to be part of these conversations as we work out the details and make it more specific. And I think it's going to take an election cycle to really debug this and do some learning. But I thank the sponsor for her willingness to take this on, because I think it's really important.
Yeah.
I have a couple of, Commissioner Hursti, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say, I was just trying to remember if we have a Disability Commission, is that functioning?
It's currently not convening and is being, having conversations with the community about what the next iteration of that commission is going to be.
So I would,
And we just funded in the budget the position that's going to help do that.
thank you for that. It would be great to actually bring Philip Wolf and other people who are disabled together, maybe for a focus group to really talk to them directly about how we could make sure that we are writing rules that will ensure that they can fully participate, whether they're candidates or whether they are people that want to work on an election that's actually being run by someone with a disability. We always do this after the fact, and it would be so much more effective if we would bring people with us, right, as we go through this process. But I agree with Commissioner Fish that until we go through a full cycle, and learn what we don't know about what we don't know, then I think as long as we're engaging those communities and keeping them connected to make sure that if we identify barriers, that we remove them as soon as possible, I think we will have a excellent election cycle. So thank you for your hard work. It's amazing how much progress we've made in such a very short period of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Commissioner
I could
Fish.
just add one other comment that I now recall. The language is shall not participate in a forum. Is that the specific trigger language?
Yes.
Okay, because there was a second category of controversy in my race, which I'll just put on the table so that you're aware of it. And that is, notwithstanding the commitment I made that if I were on a panel, I would not participate unless it was fully accessible. I did one Saturday attend a forum. Actually, it was Joanne's forum, because I was interested in seeing how those candidates were doing. So I went to a church forum. Joanne and the other candidates for the other seat were participating in debate. Philip came to that and similarly felt shut out from the process and was very critical of me for participating. And, we drew a distinction between being a participant and for our race and being in the audience at some other debate. But it still raises an interesting question. And I understand from his perspective why they were, and he didn't view them as either or. He viewed them as the same set of issues. So I offer that just to complicate our thinking a little bit, because that became a topic of conversation.
Yes, thank you.
I have a question, and I know you're prepped for this, and I don't think I got the answer prior to the session this morning, but it's my understanding, based on the rules, that if one were to have funds in their PAC, which I do, if I were to participate in this program, I would have to return those funds? Is that accurate or no?
So if they're in your candidate political committee, you would need to return them after filing your notice of intent and pay a penalty for having collected them outside of the context of the rules, but then could get certified if you met the certification requirements.
Okay, so could I stop you on that point?
Yes.
So how can you tell? I have a PAC, it's been ongoing. My PAC's been alive for, I think, 12 years now. The funds get used for a variety of purposes. They get used for sponsorships, tables, they get used for other initiatives. Most recently, for example, I made a contribution to the regional housing bond, and they could also be used for the purposes of reelection. How do you make that differentiation?
Are we talking about a candidate's political committee or a PAC separate from the candidate's political committee?
It is the candidates, yeah.
Okay, so we require, once a person has filed their notice of intent, at the next reporting deadline, they need to report all of their activity in that political committee, from the beginning of the election cycle. And if there are funds in that political committee already, they can transfer up to $5,000 of those funds as seed money into the account they're going to use for the public money to, come into and to make all of their expenditures out of. So what they'll need to do is essentially freeze the old account so that they can't use it to support their election while they're a participating candidate.
So as long as it's sequestered, if it is sequestered separately, it could still be used for those other purposes. It just could not be used for the furtherance of a local race. Is that a fair way of stating it?
Since the election.
Just so I understand it.
Well, so if it's an account separate from the candidate's political
Right,
committee,
so what
it
if
could
you
be
create an
used.
entirely new PAC just for the purpose of participating in the public election cycle?
There are two rules that this relates to. So one set of rules, if it's your candidate committee, then you basically have to freeze any of the money that was raised prior to the election cycle, and then have a separate account that you're spending, bringing money into for as a participating candidate and spending money out of. If it's a separate political entity that's not the candidate's political committee, then it can continue to do its business as long as it doesn't make any actions that supports your candidacy or opposes one of your opponents.
Okay, and who would make
The
that
funds from the
determination?
election.
Let me give you just a crazy example. Let's say we had a 6th congressional district in the state of Oregon, and it was in Portland, and we had a congressional candidate with $750,000 in their PAC, and they decide, hey, I'd really like to run for the city council, I'd like to run for mayor or whatever. Walk me through that. Does that mean that they could not use the $750,000 in their PAC for any political purpose while they are running, and they would establish a separate PAC for the purposes of the election? Is that a correct interpretation?
Well, so one of the scenarios we were thinking through with the rules was, what if someone thinks they're running for one race at a different level that doesn't have a public financing program, and so they're raising money and spending money according to the state rules, not the program rules. And then something happens, a seat opens up, for example, and they think, actually, I'd like to run for that seat at the city level. In that case, all they have to do is, if they want to use that account that they'd already been raising money into and spending money out of, but not according to program rules, they just need to remedy any rule they've broken, pay, return contributions that were in excess of the limits, or cure any prohibited expenditures, pay a penalty, and then apply for certification. So that's how it would work in that scenario.
Okay, so, and just to make sure I understand this then, as long as there is a sequestered independent PAC related to the race at the municipal level, and the other resources are definitively not spent for the furtherance of that campaign, you could still participate using that new PAC and only that new PAC. Is that correct?
So the other rule is that you can't.
We can't get you to say yes or no.
Sure, I know. So the other rule is that you can't solicit or direct contributions to an entity
Right.
other than your campaign committee.
Okay.
That spends money on your race. So if you have already done so and it's already spent some money on your race, then you pay a penalty according to the rules.
Okay. And one final question related to this, and we don't necessarily have to nail these answers down today, but I'm just giving you some of my concerns that I think we're going to have some very clear, definitive rules around. Who gets to decide? Let's say that you're right and that I've established a separate PAC, and we have funds going in from the public elections process, and somebody says, but hey, wait a minute, you are through your other PAC supporting a fundraising effort or a dinner for a key constituency, let's say Planned Parenthood or NARAL, Pro-Choice Oregon, that could have an impact on this race. Is that a contribution to the race or isn't? And who gets to decide? Who is the definitive decider?
So the director of the Open Accountable Elections makes the initial determination and sends a letter, announcing a penalty or sometimes decertification. Then the candidate can then at request reconsideration if they believe that that determination was made in error. And if that's not resolved to their satisfaction, they can do a formal appeal, and we're working with the state administrative law judges to handle the formal appeals process.
Okay, good. And then last but not least, and I may have just misinterpreted this in the proposed rules, it appears that the administrator has the authority to change the rules unilaterally for a period of up to 1 year. Is that accurate?
That's right, that's emergency rulemaking.
And what kind of rules are subjected, what's the latitude there? What is the span of control over those kinds of unilaterally made rules?
The same rulemaking authority as the law provides.
Which is what?
Which is, it's essentially this list, the list that I kind of listed out earlier, and then any other rules necessary for the administration of the program.
And that's similar to other administrative rules that the director of a bureau gets to make changes. As I said at the beginning, normally these rules wouldn't even come to council, but we wanted them to.
Okay, I'll stew on that for a while.
Okay.
But I appreciate your responses. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I have to say it, I was totally with you until you tried to answer the mayor's questions.
Okay.
And then I got more confused than I've been about this process. Because I never heard you say yes or no
Okay.
to the mayor's question about if I've got this campaign fund that's separate from my city campaign fund, can I still use that campaign fund for all the legal purposes that I would be able to use that campaign fund for, as long as it's not impacting the race that I'm running for with the city public finance system?
That's a yes.
Thank you. I've been waiting for that, right? Okay, so those two can be totally separate and operate separately, as long as I'm not commingling those funds.
Commingling or using one to support
Using them
another.
for
Yes.
a dubious purpose, like getting elected to the city council, right? Okay, thank you. I feel much better now. Thank you.
Very good. Any further discussion? Very well. Is there any public testimony on this item, Carla?
Yes, we have 3 people signed up.
Very good.
Come on up. Lightning, Charles Bridge Crane Johnson, and Maggie.
Thank you, everyone, for signing up today. 3 minutes each, please. Name for the record. No.
Yes, my name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Superhumanity. Now, so it's my understanding is that one of the reasons this program is being put together is to take in $500 from a candidate, and then the city will match those funds. Now, if I'm incorrect on that, you're going to have to explain that, because what I'm seeing here is that the city is wanting to subsidize this, the candidate, and then put a lot of restrictions on what they're going to be able to do as far as running as a candidate. And where I find this rather interesting is that you have a penalty system in place to come back. If you don't report properly, you'll be penalized. We can go up to $10,000 in penalties. We'll do a 12% interest rate. We'll contact the city attorney. We may seek civil penalties, we may not. And then on the rules itself, you say, well, we can pass an amendment to change the rules, and those rules are good for 12 months. There'll be no city council approval, but if you want to make those rules permanent after 12 months, then we'll put it up in front of the city council. And then you counter back and you say, well, this isn't going to be political if we run a lot of penalties on this candidate, and they're giving us maybe information that's late. And there's a lot of issues here that just opens up a situation to where, let's just say I wanted to run against the mayor. And I have city council members that don't like me because of the way I've spoke out against them in the past. And then I sign up for this program, and then you have some director and they go, oh, that's Lightning. Oh, boy, look at this. A little bit late here, this, that. Oh, well, he's got this separate fund over here. Well, we'll let it slide over here, but oh, Lightning, this is our time, Lightning. This is our time to let you know how government really works. And you know, here's my problem. You're trying to be open and accountable here, But I think this is purely political on jeopardizing a candidate's position to be able to move forward. And such as what the mayor said, he's already has funds over here. Now he's supposed to possibly freeze these funds in some manner, then report these funds over here, and then come back here and then get approval. Oh, well, you're in violation, more penalties. Well, I'd like to have access to every document and every penalty on any candidate, because everything that comes up, I want the media to have everything. Are you going to allow me to do that, to hand everything to the media?
Yes,
Fair enough.
everything will be posted online and everybody will be able to see it.
Okay, and this is my option if I'm a candidate to go into this program, correct? So wouldn't that influence maybe a vote? Because this person doesn't want to go into this program, but it looks open and accountable, we'll be viewing this. This person does not. Wouldn't that kind of influence that vote at the end of the day by the public, possibly? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Very good, thank you.
Just to correct your initial statements,
Yes.
the rule is that you can only accept $250 from any Portland resident.
Okay.
And then only the first $50 is matched.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Maggie, would you like to?
Hi, I'm Maggie. I don't want to run for office, but I want to comment on the PAC-related issue first. It's too bad that we've got this PAC situation where you just run for election all term instead of having just, here's your public money to run for 6 weeks and that's it, you're done, and the rest of the time you're running the government instead of running for office. You see what I'm saying? Rather have you fixing and, government problems than just running for office. That's not a job. And then the second thing I would like to say on voting access and disability, voting access and new citizens, voting access and, formerly incarcerated, voting access for low-income marginalized citizens. I want to comment about voting access. I worked on Obama's 2012 campaign. I covered the university and I covered the low-income and disabled people. And I want to tell you that they feel very marginalized, especially disabled people. I would go to the low-income apartments and, I would explain to them that I couldn't tell them how to vote, but I could tell them who the people were and who, which district they were in, and that was it. And at the end of the campaign, I had, so many envelopes, running back, when the clock was running down, that I had to stuff some envelopes into my shirt because I had no more room to carry any back to the district. And, whether they were voting Republican or Democrat, I consider it a triumph when a low-income disabled person votes. And, you can go back in my history and look, I bring blind people and deaf people up to the governor's office and help them write notes to the governor. And I just think we need better campaign literature, because the newspaper campaign literature is really bad. We need Reader's Digest, big print, color photos, show which district each person is in, what time their drop-in is, when they're available, all that, email. And then we need, what disabled people love? They love it when the campaign people come with the boxes and they come to the apartments and they don't have to go to the polling booth. They love them to come and pick up the envelopes and take them right back to the precinct district and drop them right off. So the students can do that.
Thank you. Commissioner Hardesty.
Maggie,
Yeah.
I just want to say, there's some things that government shouldn't do. And what you're talking about is one of those things that I do not believe government should do. That is the job of community nonprofits. I've done a lot of voter registration and education campaigns, and we really don't want government going out organizing meetings to explain to people how to vote, right?
Right. That's why I was doing it, because I'm not
Right.
in government. And I said at the beginning, I don't want to run for office.
Right. But let me just say, the League of Women Voters does one of the best jobs of really explaining both sides of ballot measures. It is in plain English. They do an excellent job of that, right?
Yeah, and I got to say, the League of Women Voters, they're getting up there in age, and they don't like to go out to the universities and disable people because they,
However, it is
they need young-
available in every library. It is
yeah.
accessible in every corner of the city of
Yeah.
Portland, right? So let's utilize community resources
Yeah.
that we have
Newspapers
rather
and
than
libraries, I
trying to
agree.
duplicate
Yeah.
efforts that work so well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it'd be great to have ballot boxes at the library, where, oh, that's right, there is here, that's right.
Very,
All right.
very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Fritz.
Maggie, I just want to say thank you for your testimony and thank you for the work that you've done. It's obvious that
okay.
you shared the passion on this issue.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Well, and I'll just say, I know many of the women who are involved with the League of Women Voters, and most of them are going to outlast me for sure. Good morning. How are you doing today?
Or perhaps at least outlast your mayoral regime.
I
I'm Charles
hope so.
Bridge Crane Johnson, and I'd like to, put a little context. Back in 2012, 38,762 voters thought that Cameron Whitten would be the best state treasurer. But alas, Ted crushed him with almost 1 million votes. And now we have a city council where I would say that the most elected person, even though only 3 people are currently in the 5 chairs, the most elected person is Joanne Hardesty, who had over 150,000 votes, almost 40,000 votes ahead of the actual mayor. And as we move towards the 2020 election, it's great that we're going to this open and accountable election system, so more grassroots people that are, not as engaged with the local democratic machinery will be able to run. But as we learned from the mayor's questions, we have things in this ordinance like Part 15, Q3, Roman numeral 4, where fortunately those things only all fit in 13 pages. But there's a maximum penalty of $10,000, and I think that that's the thing that actually most ties in with the concern that Lightning raised, is how do we make sure that one candidate, when they make it have a problem, is not penalized more than another. It's going to be a learning process, and I'm definitely in favor of seeing you all vote unanimously as a unanimous panel of 5 to put this into practice. But the phrase political action committee isn't in there, only the phrase political committee. So, hopefully what Lightning alluded to in his question that Amanda Fritz answered is people's conduct within the system is an issue that we get to judge them by. If a person says, oh, I don't know if I want to use the highly regulated public process system, I just want to grab bootloads of cash from Monsanto or Nike and run.
Okay,
Yeah,
please,
the
please, let's let him finish
Sentinel
his
Hotel,
testimony.
Gordon Eastland, Trump's EU ambassador. So, but please do vote yes, and make sure that we develop a context so that maybe there's eventually some language linking the amount of the penalty to the size of the indiscretion. I couldn't see in the brief time we were looking at this how that's in there, but it's an important program as we look at Commissioner Fritz moving on, and as our community tries to decide which people are going to be vying for the mayoral seat and how we're all going to pressure Joanne to run for that seat. We need to have these processes so that great people that have already been mentioned, the late, great Sue Stahl, who is no longer with us, can inform these conversations, and Philip Wolf. And I also hope that we get some progress to
wrap it up,
resurrect
please.
something like the PCOD, the Portland Commission on Disability. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, both of you. Any, Commissioner Fritz?
I just want to say we need more
No,
students.
Maggie, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Commissioner Fritz.
Would you be comfortable putting an emergency clause on this? Would anybody not be comfortable putting an emergency clause on this? Then
Second that motion.
I move to add an emergency clause because it's in the public interest to have these rules in effect when the program opens on July 1st.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fritz, a second from Commissioner Udaly. Any further discussion on this particular amendment? Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The amendment passes. To the main motion, sorry.
We just put an emoji.
Yep, this is a resolution. To the main motion, as amended, please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
I'm sorry.
It's an
I'm
ordinance.
sorry. That is not right.
It's an
I
ordinance.
withdraw that. This is an ordinance.
Yes.
And
just
we've
said
now
it.
put in an emergency clause.
Right.
Right, okay, sorry. Coffee hadn't kicked in yet.
Aye again?
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Colleagues, thank you for delving into these rules, for the engagement in the system. Thank you very much to Susan Mote, Anna Paisior, Christina Nieves, and Tim Crail. Thank you to the Open and Accountable Elections Commission. You've done amazing work in a very, very short time. Thank you to the Voice for All Portlanders Coalition, who've been engaged in this process since the very beginning. And thank you just to the people of Portland for electing me in the first place with public campaign financing, and for knowing that this is wise use of taxpayers' money, because it's going to increase the trust in government and the avoiding the appearance of corruption for politicians. It's a small step, but a necessary one. Aye.
Wheeler.
First of all, sorry for the confusion. People may not realize that sometimes sitting in this chair requires an incredible amount of multitasking, and I sort of blew it there, so sorry for the confusion. I think this is an important step in the right direction. I want to be very clear. I think there will need to be revisions over time. I think there'll be a learning process, and this is a process that's going to evolve. But I want to thank Commissioner Fritz in particular for the considerable amount of effort that she and her team have put into this. And I'm glad that we now have the commission ready to step up their work. That gives more public eyes on the process. And I look forward to seeing how this evolves in the months and years ahead. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted as amended. Next item, please, is, yes, we can do this, 520.
Adopt the Portland Parks and Recreation Integrated Pest Management Policy to prohibit the use of Avitrol and other avicides on city-owned property and infrastructure.
Commissioner Fish.
Thank you, Mayor. In early 2018, the city received multiple reports of suspicious crow deaths across Portland. The Oregonian reported on witnesses who saw nearly a dozen crows falling dead out of the sky. Clearly, someone or something was poisoning crows. Anyone who has come downtown in the early evening during the winter has likely seen the annual gathering of crows. It's a spectacle to be seen. Thousands of crows amassing in trees, on power lines, and on rooftops. This annual gathering is not welcomed by everybody. The crows leave behind a mess, generating calls and emails from residents demanding that the city do something. While we cannot and should not control the natural behavior of thousands of wild birds, the city's response has been measured. Additional cleaning of the streets and sidewalks by Clean and Safe, and the hiring of a team of falconers to fly hawks through downtown. To some in our community, those efforts were not enough, and we think a resident may have intentionally fed birds Avitrol, the deadly commercial-grade neurotoxin that killed the crows. This is unacceptable. These poisons are inhumane, and these types of actions risk exposing the general public, local wildlife, and the entire food chain to a dangerous neurotoxin. Today, I'm proud to introduce representatives from both of my bureaus, the Bureau of Environmental Services and Parks and Recreation, to explain how we are working to prohibit the use of Avitrol and other bird poisons on public property. With us this morning are Nicole Leinen, Pest Management Specialist with Parks and Recreation, and David Helzer, Environmental Specialist with BES, with a presentation. After their presentation, we have invited a panel that includes Bob Salinger, Stephanie Boyles-Griffin, and Lisa Frisch. And after that, we're going to take a picture, if I can indulge the council. So Nicole and David, welcome, and take it away.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Dave Helzer. I'm a biologist with Environmental Services.
Nicole Lenahan, I oversee the Parks and Rec Integrated
Nicole,
Pest-
move the mic a little closer to you. Yeah, take it.
Integrated Pest Management Program.
I'm just going to give you a brief overview to build on Commissioner Fish's introductory comments. little background on the history of city council actions for protection of birds and conservation of other wildlife here in Portland. The city has taken a number of actions over the years, going all the way back to 1986, with the adoption of the great blue heron as the official city bird. And a little more information on crows in Portland. Crows are a familiar urban bird. They're renowned for their intelligence. During the summertime, crows are all throughout our neighborhoods right now, spread out throughout the city in family groups raising young. During the winter, crows form up into larger flocks, and on winter nights, they form communal roosts, numbering in the tens of thousands sometimes, usually thousands of birds. They do this because there's safety in numbers, for protection from the elements, warmth, for example, protection from predators, and also in these wintertime roosts, they share information on food resources. Along with this comes a nuisance, which is crow droppings on the sidewalk. Downtown Clean and Safe has used a couple of non-lethal strategies to address this nuisance of bird droppings on the sidewalks, including using, as Commissioner Fish described, falconers who have trained hawks. And these trained hawks harass the crows as they're settling in for the night and kind of herd them into safe areas, including the parks behind City Hall. And that's what this photo here illustrates, is the wintertime crow roost on a snowy night, taken by a representative, actually, of the Portland Police Bureau. So Avitrol is an avicide. Well, what is an avicide? An avicide is a class of pesticide used to control birds. Avitrol is a lethal form of bird control. It's a neurotoxin. We've had several crow poisoning events, as Commissioner Fish mentioned, with dozens of dead and dying crows found falling from the sky, notably in 2014 and 2018. In those instances, it was confirmed that Avitrol was the cause of the crow deaths. It is unknown who used the product. The Oregon Department of Agriculture is investigating that. Avitrol and other avicides represent some significant risks to other birds. For example, birds that are not the target of the control. Wild birds can consume the bait, the poison bait. Predators then can consume, such as eagles or falcons, can consume birds who've consumed the poison bait and absorb it that way. It's also a risk for pets who may consume the bait. And finally, it's a risk for people. In fact, the label for this restricted use avicide prohibits it being used in an area where children are present or an area where children may have access. I'm going to turn it over to Nicole now.
Hi, thank you. As many of you know, Parks oversees thousands of acres of land, from natural areas to botanical gardens, golf courses, and developed parks, each with varying sites and with specific needs, usabilities, and public expectations of uses. Because of this, Parks has an integrated pest management program to help manage the land. It's available to staff and the public, and is also adopted by many city bureaus. What is IPM? Well, it's a process, and it can be seen as a playbook with multiple tools in your toolbox to use when you have a pest. And it can also help you prevent pests from emerging as well. When a pest arises, the IPM program helps the staff decide if they should control the pest in the first place, what happens if they don't control the pest, and the best way to control it. So first, we look to local city, state, federal agencies such as Soil Water Conservation, Oregon Department of Agriculture, EPA, USDA, and local universities on the best science available for pest management. Some control options that we utilize are cultural, physical, mechanical, manual, biological, and chemical, but usually it's a combination of a few of them. Once we make the application, then we monitor the results and determine if we need to repeat. Parks has recently added and avian management policy to our IPM program, reinforcing parks and other city bureaus' stance of no chemical harm to birds. And it also guides employees to review BES best management practices for scheduling maintenance to limit harm to nesting birds. Why have we gone this route? Well, the city cannot supersede Oregon Department of Agriculture's regulations, who enforce state and federal regulations regarding pesticide use. But the city can model actions we would like to see taken by the public. And we can also use this to promote awareness of city's stance on avicides. So we are here today to request the city require other bureaus to adopt Portland Parks and Recreation's IPM policy on avian management.
Thank you very much. That was very succinct. If there are no questions from my colleagues, we'll invite up our panel. Thank you very much. Bob Salinger, Conservation Director for the Audubon Society of Portland. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that both Bob and Audubon have been indispensable partners in developing this policy. Stephanie Boyles-Griffin, Senior Director and Wildlife Biologist with the Humane Society of the United States. And Stephanie, welcome to Portland. It's a nice convergence of your being here and a chance for you to testify, and we thank you for taking the time. And Lisa Frisch with the Portland Business Alliance. With that, I'll turn it over to Bob.
Good morning. My name is Bob Salinger. I'm the Conservation Director for Portland Audubon Society. And I would just add, Tara from Center for Biological Diversity is also here today. I would like to testify as well. So thank you very much for this resolution. We are here today to express our strong support and appreciation for the work that has been done on this, particularly to Commissioner Fish and his staff, Jamie Dunphy, and to city staff, James Allison, Dave Heltzer, Paul Ketchum, Caitlin Lovell, Nicole Lyman. A lot of work has gone into this, and we really appreciate the work that has been done. These types of avicides are dangerous, they're indiscriminate, they're cruel, and they're inhumane, and they have no place on our landscape whatsoever, and particularly on an urban landscape. Dave's told you a little bit about Avitrol, but I want to tell you a little bit more. It is an avicide, a bird pesticide. It is a neurotoxin. It is put in bait, and birds are lured in, and they eat it. It is advertised as humane. It is anything but humane. It is designed to trigger an alarm response in birds. Birds seizure, they convulse, they scream, they lie on the ground on their sides and their back, their legs pedaling in the air, and then for the most part, they eventually die. That can go on for minutes, it can go on for hours. The pesticide takes sometimes a long time to kick in, so birds can disperse over wide areas before they actually are impacted and then literally fall out of the sky and die on the ground. It's marketed as non-lethal, but in fact, if you read the EPA registration and label, it says explicitly, quote, birds that react in alarm usually die. It is inhumane and it is lethal. Applicators are required to keep the poison area free of people and pets until all poisoned birds are collected. However, this is totally unrealistic. It's a joke. It can take an extended period of time to kick in, and a flock of birds or an individual bird that has consumed this poison can travel miles before it actually feels the impacts. This means that birds can get scattered over miles and miles of our city after they've been poisoned, in our neighborhoods, in our parks, in our community. And the risk to people and pets and other wildlife is particularly high because if you think about the mechanism of death, these birds are lying on the ground, falling out of the sky, lying on the ground, screaming, pedaling, flapping their wings involuntarily. That's the kind of response that draws attention. So if you're a red-tailed hawk or a peregrine falcon or a dog or a cat or a child, that's the kind of thing that might cause you to come and pick up these birds. And by the way, this item, this compound is both orally and dermally toxic. So it's toxic to ingestion, it's toxic to the touch. This is really scary stuff, and yet it is sold and legally used. So I want to tell you a little bit about the two events that we had because I think it's important to get it on the record. The first one was November 24th, 2014, the day before Thanksgiving. Dead crows started showing up at Chapman and Lonsdale squares. A little while later, they were discovered in Waterfront Park, a 25-plus block area covered in dead crows. We started getting calls. The city started getting calls. The city responded. The state responded. The feds responded. Audubon responded. We were all down there the day before Thanksgiving collecting dead crows and trying to figure out what went on. The fire department responded and took air samples because there was a concern that this was a terrorist attack, that somebody had put something into our environment, and this was actually terrorism. It is terrorism, but different kind than what people were thinking at that moment, but it was scary enough. We set up an emergency hotline. We called in extra volunteers and we called in extra staff. And for the next several days throughout the holiday weekend, we collected dead crows and responded to every single report of sick and injured birds. Actually went out into the field and did that. Our Wildlife Care Center did that and collected them and then got them off to the labs for shipping, for testing. And it was in fact confirmed that this was Avitrol. But we didn't know what it was at the time. And that's one of the really scary things is you don't know until several days, sometimes weeks later after they get done with the testing. The second event was in late January of 2018. People in Northeast Portland near MLK and Northeast Jessup witnessed a flock of crows flying overhead, and suddenly birds literally started dropping from the sky, crashing into the ground. Some were dead when they hit the ground. Others screamed and twitched and seizured and convulsed and then died. A reporter that covered it said it was one of the worst things that she had ever seen. Again, a massive mobilization, city, state, feds, Audubon. We again set up a hotline. We again went out for days, actually weeks afterwards, looking at sick and dying birds to see if this was a continuation of the pattern. We are still getting calls today from that announcement of if you see sick and dying birds, call us. People are still calling saying, I saw a sick crow yesterday. I'm worried because I think it might have been poison. There might be poison in my neighborhood. Now, this is obviously not something that's associated with that incident, but it shows how it gets into the psyche of our community. We put up a $1,000 reward on each one of these, but we didn't identify anybody who had actually done it, unfortunately. These incidents have occurred in other cities as well. There was a big incident in Bend several years back in which they poisoned over a senior center and birds lay dying on the rooftop on the ground. They measured the temperature of that ground where those birds were lying and convulsing. It was over 140 degrees. Anybody that tells you this is a humane way to die hasn't really looked at this product. You can imagine a wild animal lying out in the open on 140-degree ground, twitching and convulsing. I want to call out our Wildlife Care Center because this is the kind of stuff that our Wildlife Care Center responds to. We have a Wildlife Care Center volunteer here today, Carrie May, in the front row. We have over 100 volunteers and several staff. We deal with 3,000 injured animals a year and 10,000 wildlife phone calls. These are among the scariest types of situations we see. People ask me, is it scary to work with wild animals, eagles and bears? No, it's scary to work with poisoned animals because you can't identify them as they come in the door. They don't come in with a tag saying, do not handle me because I have a dermal poison on my body. That's what really worries me with our staff and volunteers is this kind of a risk that we have to respond to. And it's not a theoretical risk. It's a real risk. I and another staff person were poisoned in the 1990s handling birds that were poisoned with a different compound called Ritterbird. There was a dermal poison, a contact poison. Red tail came in, was identified as hit by car. In fact, it was covered in this compound, and we both wound up showing symptoms of that poison. It is a real risk to the community, and it's a real risk to the people that respond. I particularly call out our care center today because we're going to go through a big expansion process next year. And this is the kind of thing that we're set up to do. We provide a really big service to this community, and we'd love to have council support into the importance of this facility as we go forward with that expansion process. Your endorsement will be helpful in that so we can continue to respond to these kinds of events. So I want to end today by simply noting that this is a very important step that you're taking. I want to note that the city does not poison birds, and we appreciate that. And although this applies on city property, and the city isn't using these poisons, this will prevent anybody from even considering it in the future on city property. But more importantly, it sends a message to our community that these poisons are unacceptable, they're dangerous, and they don't have any place here. It sends a message to the state that they need to do a better job regulating these incidences and following up on them. and also perhaps giving local authority so that we can regulate them better in our own communities. And finally, it sends a message to the EPA, which is responsible for licensing and re-registering these pesticides periodically. We hear constantly that we don't have any data about these pesticides from the EPA. We don't know that they're causing problems. Well, it's very, very hard to actually identify non-target incidences like the ones we see and the problems that they create because they don't get well documented. So what you're doing today is documenting what occurred. You're putting the city on record, as other cities have as well. And when this does come up for re-registration, hopefully what we'll see is EPA making the right decision the next time and getting these products, this product in particular, but these kinds of products off the market permanently and forever. So thank you very much for all your work on this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Good
Ms.
morning.
Griffin?
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Boyles-Griffin, and I serve as the Senior Scientist in the Wildlife Protection Department at the Humane Society of the United States in Washington, D.C. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I also serve as a Science and Policy Director for the Bott-Steber Institute for Wildlife Fertility Control. That institute serves as sort of the world's premier clearinghouse on anything and everything having to do with that field of wildlife management. In 2011, I was appointed by Governor Martin O'Malley to serve as a commissioner on the Maryland Wildlife Advisory Commission. Just wanted to kind of give you all a little bit of background about myself. I've been working in the field of human-wildlife conflict resolution for about 20 years. During that time, I've worked with federal, state, government agencies, municipalities, and corporations to implement humane, sustainable programs. For instance, I did my master's thesis working with the Virginia Department of Transportation to resolve conflicts with beavers in a humane and sustainable way where they dam road culverts and cause roads to wash out. And we're currently working with a team of my associates and colleagues at HSUS with the Bureau of Land Management to find ways to manage wild burros at a herd management area in northwestern Arizona using fertility control vaccines. So, but on behalf of the HSUS and our Portland, Oregon members and constituents, we really appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony this morning and to express our strong support for the proposed resolution to adopt the Portland Parks and Recreation's integrated pest management policy that prohibits the use of Avitrol and other avicides on city-owned property and on infrastructure. As Bob has already said and was presented by the Parks Department, Avitrol is a restricted use toxic chemical used to kill pigeons and other birds. That's what it's registered for. It's promoted as a flock frightening agent or a repellent, but it is in fact a nervous system poison that can indiscriminately kill any bird or any mammal that consumes it, including livestock and even companion animals. Birds who consume it suffer convulsions and often die very slow, painful deaths. It is not only really traumatic for the birds to die this way, as Bob stated, but it's also really traumatic for people, especially children, who witness or try to help dying birds when they're found in public spaces. These kind of grisly events have been reported on by our constituents, and it's been covered in the news media over many years. This avicide has been in use. Me personally, when I first entered this realm of work that I do now, one of the first things I got called off on is birds falling out of the sky and gathering them up and trying to figure out what was wrong with them, seeing the bait around. I'd never seen Avitrol before. I thought it was just corn that had a little bit of green matter on it. I had no idea it was a toxicant, and it is a dermal toxicant, and I was probably picking it up with my bare hands, just trying to keep another bird from consuming it, and was putting myself at risk doing so. I know better now, but what if it had been a kid, you know? And not me. So, users claim that these distressed behavior of poison birds actually frightens them away and their flock members away. But any frightening effect of Avitrol on surviving birds is very short-lived, and because birds remaining in the area return quickly and reproduce. And that's basically why killing birds by any means, not just Avitrol, it's not only cruel, it fails to address the root cause of whatever the problem may be, leading to an endless killing, an unnecessary killing cycle. So from the HSUS's perspective, when impacts are being experienced from birds aggregating in areas due to attractants or an area that's accessible for nesting and loafing, we encourage cities to implement a humane integrated approach to mitigate these impacts and manage bird populations. For example, many of the conflicts with birds can be tied to feeding, so we support efforts by cities to curb the intentional or unintentional feeding of birds by educating the public and proactively removing food attractants. We also recommend using a wide variety of devices available to permanently prevent birds from roosting and nesting in areas where they're not wanted. Our decades of work on conflict resolution with communities across the U.S. demonstrates to us that these kinds of integrated and comprehensive approaches to managing issues with birds and other wildlife are the most successful in providing long-term resolution and preventing unnecessary killing of both target and non-target animals. And finally, we support the use of fertility control methods, like the product ovocontrol, to stabilize and reduce the size of flocks over time when it's necessary and appropriate to do so. Ovocontrol is a bird contraception that comes in the form of kibble-type food, which causes birds to eat it that regularly to lay eggs that would fail to develop. So it's humane, it's sustainable, doesn't always have to be used, but in situations where it might be beneficial to slowly reduce the flock size over time, it's something that's an option for cities. And for these reasons, all of the above, we strongly support the proposed resolution and applaud the City of Portland for its leadership in establishing a humane and compassionate standard for mitigating conflicts with birds that we hope corporations, businesses, and private property owners in and around Portland will also soon follow. Avatrol has been banned in Great Britain, and 2 cities in Canada have also banned it, Red Deer and Halifax. It's also restricted in New York, the state, and banned in New York City, San Francisco, Fort Collins, and Boulder, Colorado. We are thrilled that the City of Portland will now serve as a trailblazer for the development and implementation of humane and effective bird management policies, and hope to see these policies replicated in other cities and towns in Oregon, the Pacific Northwest, and beyond. Thank you again for the opportunity to comment on the proposed resolution this morning, and I'm happy to address any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. It's a great honor to have you testify
privilege.
before us.
Thank you.
Now we have up Lisa Frisch from the Portland Business Alliance. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. My name is Lisa Frisch, and I'm the Downtown Retail Program Director for Portland Business Alliance and Downtown Clean and Safe. I'm here today to provide information on city-approved methods that we have employed to minimize nuisance issues related to crows in the downtown area. I do have a video I'm going to show halfway through my testimony. In 2015, on our annual business census and survey data collection, we were surprised to note that many of our respondents felt that downtown was not as clean as it was in the past. As you know, Clean and Safe spends over $1 million with a contract with Central City Concern to provide janitorial services in downtown Portland. We hadn't noticed a huge difference in the amount of litter that we were picking up in downtown, but we did notice that the crow population was booming, something that we hadn't previously seen. In some high crow population areas, streets, sidewalks, furnishings were carpet bombed with bird droppings. Our cleaning staff power washes every sidewalk in the Clean and Safe District twice a year, but we started to power wash every night in high crow population areas. 2 issues that presented: we power wash overnight so as not to disturb pedestrian activity during the day, but crows dirty the sidewalks around 7 a.m. in the morning. Additionally, crows were causing issues in the cold weather months, and we cannot power wash during freezing conditions as it would lead to unsafe conditions on the sidewalk. In 2015, Portland Mall Management, Inc. partnered with Clean and Safe to contract with a company that provided a Zamboni-like sidewalk scrubber that we dubbed the Poop Master 6000. And I have a video that aired on NBC Nightly News about the Poop Master 6000 that I'm going to show you.
In the dark downtown Portland, you might not be able to see the crows, but you can definitely see the mess they leave behind.
The challenge was how to clean after the crows leave at like 7 in the morning. You know, they wake up and they do their thing and they leave.
The crows roost here in the winter. Their droppings coat everything from statues to sidewalks. But today, and 5 days a week from now until spring, this little green machine is making a difference. It's called the Poop Master 6000 and comes complete with a rather guilty-looking crow on the front. Portland Mall Management is renting the Poop Master for a 6-month trial. It cleans up all the droppings in the mall area and works in wet or dry weather. People we talked to seem to appreciate it.
I think it would beautify the area. It would take the stench away because it does kind of smell.
and it would just make the city more attractive.
At the very least, it's getting a lot of attention.
People come up and want to take a picture, and I'm like, yeah, sure, you know. For the most part, they're liking it.
Thank you. A little bit of humor for today's important and serious topic. The Poop Master 6000 cleaned the sidewalk, but it was a slow process. You saw how the machine was very slow. It was very limited in scope and very expensive, $30,000 to rent for a season. The Poop Master did make a return appearance in late 2016, but at that time we sought a more sustainable solution. Since that time, we worked with integrated avian solutions to help direct the crow populations from high pedestrian areas instead to green spaces where they might have a more enjoyable experience. Integrated Avian Solutions employs falconry to manage nuisance bird populations by allowing a raptor, in this case a Harris hawk, to fly near groups of crows.
Oh, you didn't say murders of crows. I was waiting for that. It's in the document here.
I think it might not be politically correct crow term.
Ooh.
I read something online that some people have asked us not to use that term, so.
Interesting. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Sorry about that.
It's the proper term, though.
It was the proper term, but might not be a correct term. The presence of the raptor makes the birds roost elsewhere. There are no sounds emitted. There is no contact between the birds. We just wrapped up our third year of the program, and you may have noticed that bird droppings have diminished in the central city, while Waterfront Park is a new haven for crows at night. We want to thank the City of Portland for partnering with us on these innovative solutions. Through the journey, we never employed any avicide or Avitrol or any tactics that were not supported by the city or the Audubon Society. We are always looking for innovative solutions that crop up to issues in downtown Portland and hope to act as a model for other enhanced service districts. We are very proud to show our successful results, and we'll be rolling out the next phase of our crow abatement program this October. Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, questions for our distinguished panel?
I've learned a lot today. Thank you for being here.
That's a superb presentation. Thank you. That concludes our formal presentation. Carla, has anyone signed up?
Yes, we have 2 people signed up.
Very good.
We have Maggie and Tara Cornelise.
Come on up. Name for the record, please.
Hello, thank you,
Morning.
Commissioners and Mayor. I am Dr. Tara Cornelisi, and I'm a senior scientist with the Center for Biological Diversity. We're a national nonprofit where we work to conserve biological diversity. We have many offices around the country, but I'm based here in Portland. So under that hat, as well as a resident of Portland and someone who loves wildlife, I just would like to provide some quick comment. Basically, I would just like to express my support and appreciation for this great resolution banning Avitrol and other bird poisons. With the current mass extinction crisis, the UN report just came out recently, 1 million species are at risk of extinction, and because of human activities. We're really lucky that any wildlife can survive with us in our cities particularly. And so instead of poisoning them with dangerous chemicals, we should really appreciate how birds can add to our human-dominated landscape, including crows and pigeons. They're very unique animals with lots of really interesting behavior and intelligence. Overall, the Center for Biological Diversity advocates nationally against the use of dangerous pesticides, particularly that impair either non-target organisms or organisms that really add to the landscape, like bees, aquatic invertebrates, and of course, birds. So we strongly support this resolution and are happy that Portland can once again provide an example for the rest of the state. I was happy to hear about that, as well as the country, and as Bob mentioned, an example for the EPA for how these dangerous chemicals should not be used and should not be re-registered to eliminate these kinds of harmful toxins. So I just wanted to say thank you for passing this resolution on behalf of myself and the Center for Biological Diversity.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank all the people who came to testify on this issue. And is there any way to prevent this chemical from being used on private property as well? Cruelty to animals and the spread of cancer-causing dermal toxins is not a good thing. So it's great that the city wants to do it on city structures and sidewalks, but what can be done to ban it from private use? And also, is that Zamboni electric or oil-based? And couldn't they just use like a carpet cleaner thing? You know, the carpet cleaner squirts the warm water and then vacuums it up, and it's not quite as big. Doesn't cost $30,000 for a carpet cleaner.
Thanks.
And so private, ban it for on private property?
It's regulated by the feds. It's one of those areas where we have very limited role in terms of private conduct, other than using the bully pulpit. For example, talking to our friends at the port and making sure that they don't use these particular pesticides and others. But at the end of the day, we don't have a regulatory, we have a very limited regulatory function in terms of private actors. So what we're hoping is to set an example of how we use this in the public sphere, and then use the bully pulpit to get others to follow us.
Okay, I just want to mention that the skin is like the lungs. It's very permeable. And recently they did a study on sunscreen, and there's some chemicals in sunscreen that get in the system. So this dermal toxin can pass through the skin very easily. And we need to stress that for people who are, still using it on private property, is that it can, like they say, travel, because the birds fly, so it'll travel from private property to public property.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you both for your testimony.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank you both. And I will just say that the state, your state legislator would be the appropriate person to talk to about regulating chemicals at the state level. And I would encourage you to connect with your state representative and state senator and have them move forward on this. And I think the city will be an example that they will be able to follow.
Very good. Colleagues, any further discussion? I'd just like to say one thing, Commissioner Fish, while you have your proponents here, some of whom have traveled a long distance to be here today, and we're very grateful and honored by your presence. I thank you for bringing this to the City Council. And it is a very important issue. It might not be one that's front and center in everybody's minds, but I know that when the winter comes around again, this is a question that will pop up again, and we're going to get lots of inquiries, and we're going to get lots of emails. And I hope what the public hears today is that the livability issue is being actively engaged around by Portland Clean and Safe, the Portland Business Alliance, and others in the downtown area, and that we have employed humane approaches to addressing this problem. I just want to say, and the testimony today just underscores what I already believe, Commissioner Fish, which is this is the right thing to do because it is the wrong thing to do to use toxins to poison wildlife under any scenario where the main issue that people are concerned about is poop on the ground. That we can deal with through other means, and it does not require us to use inhumane toxins. I also just want to underscore the testimony that we heard from two of the folks this morning, which is that we are being very naive, foolish even, if we believe that using neurotoxins on wildlife will not eventually impact us as humans. And so I would strongly support this. I did have one question of staff, if I could ask them to come back, or let me ask the question, and maybe whoever may know
Nicole
the
and
answer.
David, are you still here?
They're still here.
Why don't you just come forward real quick?
Great,
And
'cause
by the
I've-
way, Nicole Linehan's title is Pest Management Specialist with the Parks Bureau. So we're very fortunate
It's a
to
good
have
job.
a dedicated staff person whose job it is to review all these policies citywide. And David is Environmental Specialist with BES.
Well, and thank you for being here and sharing your good work with the City Council and with the public. It is my understanding that at this point, we're not using Avitrol, but I heard reference to another chemical that suppresses the ability of birds to lay eggs. We're not using that either, are we?
Yeah, that was mentioned by the representative from the Humane Society. I think it's called, the product name is Ovo Control. And we are not currently using that through the IPM.
Good. And then the second question, the main purpose of this and the reason we're bringing, Commissioner Fish is bringing it to council is to ensure that all of our city bureaus are on the same page with regard to this. And it's my understanding that none of the other city bureaus at this particular point have been using those chemicals either. Is that correct?
Yes, we reached out to all the representatives that oversee integrated pest management for the bureaus, and they did not, no one reached back saying that they did use them.
Great. And then I had just sort of a question of interest just because it was raised. So the Clean and Safe folks, the Portland Business Alliance and others have brought falconers in to, and if I understood this correctly, to herd the crows into a larger green space. So they actually have targeted locations, or how does that work?
Yeah, the project between Downtown Clean and Safe and the Falconers, they've mapped out a grid of areas for priority for keeping the birds out of, the crows out of, and that includes the transit malls, and then identified safe areas. And so that includes the waterfront and other green spaces. So the Falconers use their Harris's hawks. When the crows are coming in to spend the night, when they're coming in to settle in at dusk, their metabolism is winding down and they're looking for a safe place that's free of predators. And that's when the falconers start flying their hawks. And having a hawk on the same street where you're thinking about spending the night doesn't work for the crows.
Okay, so it's eventually then just a learned behavior that this area has hawks, whereas this area over here, they come to learn don't have hawks. Is that?
It's partly a learned behavior. It's a couple times per week. So it's partly an association that this area isn't safe, but it's also continued pressure, because there's so many birds involved that they need to keep the pressure up. So that it's an ongoing process throughout the winter. So it's a mix of learned and ongoing pressure.
And then one just general interest question, and then I promise I'll stop. This was a really interesting presentation and something completely different, Commissioner Fritz. They come together as a colony in the winter. Why? Why do they do that?
So there's a number of reasons they do that. There is safety in numbers. They seek out areas that are a little bit more sheltered from the elements because they need to regulate their internal temperatures and conserve energy. So we have a heat island effect in the center of the city, so it's a little bit warmer in the central city. They are seeking safety in numbers. There are some studies and hypotheses that crows who are highly intelligent share information in these roosts about where they're finding food so they can go out and find more food the next day. And there's another hypothesis that the lights in the downtown city core help them feel a little safe because they can see predators coming. A primary predator is like a great horned owl, so they can see that animal coming. So there's a variety of reasons they do this, but it's mostly about safety and survival.
Great, thanks. Thanks for indulging me. Very interesting. Any further questions? This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading.
No, this is a
resolution.
This is
Oh, it's a resolution?
Resolution, Mayor, and
You're right. Sorry, call the roll.
following the vote on the resolution, I would beg your indulgence for a quick photograph.
You bet. Call the roll, please, Carla.
Fish?
Let me begin by thanking Nicole and David for an excellent presentation. Bob Salinger from Audubon, Stephanie Boyles-Griffin from the Humane Society, and Lisa Frisch from the Portland Business Alliance. It was an all-star lineup. Really interesting testimony. Thank you for being here today. And Stephanie Boyles-Griffin, you have an open invitation anytime you're on the West Coast to come and join us. Thanks for your great work, and thank you for honoring us with your presence today. This is a proud day for the BES and Parks families. When the mayor made the decision to put both bureaus under my watch, what we began to look for is opportunities where they could collaborate more. And there's so many natural areas of overlap in the work that Parks and BES do. This is a splendid example of where a partnership works for the benefit of the whole city, so I'm very proud of that. I want to remind my colleagues that today's resolution is one of several actions the city has taken to protect birds. This includes adopting a bird-safe building policy, bird-friendly vegetation management practices, a green roof building requirement, a bird-safe resource guide, and then most recently in our budget, approving funds to begin work on reducing light pollution. I'm proud to serve on a body that regularly demonstrates their commitment to nature in the city, and it's one of the things that makes our city so special. By our vote today, we're making a clear statement that Avatrol has no legitimate function in the city of Portland. The city of Portland is proud to lead by example, reaffirming that we do not and will not use this deadly poison, and we encourage others in our community to follow our lead. Thanks to Jamie Dunphy on my team for all the good work that he did and others, I'm very proud today to vote aye.
Hardesty?
I also want to really appreciate the guest speakers that came and spoke about this issue today. I can't vote on this without actually mentioning Poop Master 6000 because I never thought I would hear that term in this particular chamber in this particular position. But I bring Poop Master 6000 to light because as we start thinking about innovation and how we move to this clean energy future, I'm looking forward to us being able to create something that costs a whole lot less than $30,000 and actually takes into account the innovation of folks who live right here in the Portland metro area to find a solution that works for both people and animals in the city of Portland. And so I absolutely vote aye.
Daly.
Well, I want to thank Commissioner Fish for bringing this item. Of course, I'm pleased to support it. I don't want to miss this opportunity to comment on how unfortunate it is that although Oregon is thought of as a leader on environmental issues and a green state, that we're really lagging behind on this issue. And in fact, the state preempts us on banning pesticides and herbicides, specifically Roundup, glyphosate, at a local level. And I know there were a couple bills down in Salem. There have been no votes, and there's no additional hearings scheduled, so I don't think that's a good sign. So I want to encourage the public, if this is a issue you care about, please contact your legislators. And I want to encourage Salem to, if we're not going to have a statewide ban, please allow municipalities to decide for themselves what they're going to allow to be used within their jurisdictions. I vote aye.
Fritz?
Thank you, Commissioner Fish, for bringing this forward. Thank you to everybody who's spoken and has done a lot of work on this project. This has, to my knowledge, never been on the City Council's legislative agenda priorities, and so it seems like even though the legislature, as was mentioned, is currently in session, we should be starting the new list of things that we'd like our lobbyists to work on in Salem to, as Commissioner Daly said, at least take away the preemption so that we could ban these toxic products. I would have to say that the presentations were a lot more graphic and disturbing than the ones when we were talking about banning neonicotinoids, which affect bees. And this obviously illustrates that these toxins do cause harm in little creatures and big creatures and humans as well. And so thank you for bringing this to our attention. Aye.
Wheeler.
Oh, and just one more thing. I did affirmatively get from the Water Bureau that we definitely do not use it.
Wheeler.
This is good work. I appreciate it, Commissioner Fish and your team and everybody who testified today, and the great work from our bureaus. Thank you very much. I vote aye. The resolution's adopted.
Quick photograph, Mayor?
Sure.
Nicole and David, would you join us here?
Item 521, accept the Build Portland 2019 Annual Update Presentation and commend the multi-bureau partnership for advancing the Phase 1 projects in a timely and fiscally responsible manner.
Colleagues, in the face of declining federal and state financial support, many cities across the nation face the challenge of crumbling infrastructure and deferred maintenance. When faced with more needs than there are resources, it's often more urgent short-term needs like emergency repairs that are funded rather than longer-term maintenance. The risks of intergenerational inequities as this maintenance is pushed out becomes ever larger. Portland is one of the cities facing this challenge with a $310 million and growing infrastructure maintenance gap. The 2014 citywide funding options report received by Council outlined a suite of options for closing the major maintenance and asset replacement funding gap and highlighted that without substantial investment of resources to address this issue, the city risks higher costs and lower levels of service in the future. In Portland, there's also a challenge of varying sources of funds available for different types of infrastructure. Our water and sewer systems, for example, are funded through rates, while parks, transportation, and our other civic buildings are funded through the general fund, local bonds, or taxes. For those bureaus that are reliant on the general fund, inconsistent funding can mean the potential inability to maintain assets over the long term. While we've made notable progress in identifying resources such as the Parks Replacement Bond, the Capital Set-Aside Program, and the gas tax revenue, it most certainly is not enough to fill the gap. In 2017, we initiated a bold new initiative, Build Portland, to fund infrastructure renovations and repairs. With Build Portland, we expect to spend $600 million over the next 20 years for investments improving roads, bridges, parks, and buildings that the community uses every day. Carmen Merlo and Geraldine Moyle from OMF are here today to give the 2019 annual update on Build Portland and the progress the city's made on the first Build Portland projects that were initiated last year. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners. I'm Carmen Merlo, the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. With me is Geraldine Moyle, the Build Portland Program Manager. I also want to acknowledge several asset managers in the room, including Brian Doran from Travel Portland, who is on our Build Portland Community Advisory Committee. We're here today to give you the 2019 Build Portland Annual Report. As Mayor Wheeler mentioned, the city owns and manages over $35.9 billion in assets. These assets include streets, parks, water, sewer, stormwater systems, and civic buildings owned, managed, operated, and maintained by the city. Citywide asset maintenance is estimated to have at least a $310 million annual funding gap that is growing each year as costs increase and conditions deteriorate. Access to funding is challenging depending on the type of funds, the fund requirements, and the number of assets in need of maintenance and repair. The first phase of Build Portland was approved in March 2018 with a commitment to initial program investment of $50 million. 7 projects were selected that maximize the city's return on investment, minimize risk, and consider equity in the priorities of the Portland Plan. The overall goal of investing at least $600 million over the next 20 years is expected to roll out in subsequent phases with the intention of using expected returning revenue from expiring urban renewal districts to fund this work. Council will be asked to approve the funding and projects in each phase, determining the highest and best use at that time for the returning revenue and general fund debt capacity. We have great news to share with you today, so I'm going to turn it over to Geraldine Moyle, the Build Portland Program Manager, to provide an update on the program and the Phase 1 project progress.
Hello. So as part of the Build Portland 2019 annual report, we will give you a recap of how Build Portland came to be, an overview of what's occurred over the last year since the program was initiated. We'll do a Phase 1 project update, and then we'll give you an overview of the program milestones for the next fiscal year. So as both the Mayor and Carmen covered as well, in fiscal year 17-18, Build Portland was established. So there was a council session in August of 2017 that set the vision for Build Portland. In October of 2017, the Build Portland Advisory Committee was formed and charged with developing criteria to prioritize projects for Phase 1 and to create a funding plan. At that time, the Build Portland team was also directed to provide council with an annual update on Build Portland, and that's why we are here today. The first phase of projects, which includes 7 projects completed between 2018 and 2024, were approved by council in March 2018. And at that same time, the initial program cost of $50 million was approved. The general fund debt to finance this $50 million was approved in April of 2018. Over the 18-19 fiscal year, the Build Portland program and Phase 1 projects have been initiated. With the funding approved, the 7 Phase 1 projects were initiated in July. Build Portland is a multi-bureau partnership with the Chief Administrative Office, the Budget Office, and the Bureau of Revenue and Financial Services, all supporting the infrastructure bureaus who are implementing the projects. The Phase 1 projects have advanced over the first year, moving from initiation into design and development phases, and the advisory committee has been informed with quarterly updates on the status of these projects. The first 7 projects focus on transportation and parks and recreation improvements, and we'll go into more detail on each project, but as an overview, the projects are dispersed throughout the city. There are 5 location-specific projects, 4 transportation projects and 1 parks project, and there are 2 other transportation projects that are citywide and ongoing. The project team is pleased to be able to inform council that all projects are on track to meet the 2020 milestones. And these are the milestones the bureaus indicated the projects would meet 2 years from the time Build Portland funding was awarded. So now we'll do a brief overview of each of the 7 projects. The Outer Stark Corridor Improvement Project is using Build Portland dollars to upgrade paving and signals on Southeast Stark Street from Southeast 108th to Southeast 162nd Avenue. The project also provides enhanced pedestrian crossings and safety improvements in this corridor, and the project is expected to start construction in late 2020. The 42nd Avenue Bridge and Corridor Improvement Project is using Build Portland dollars to replace the bridge structure and upgrade paving. The project also provides sidewalk, pedestrian crossings, and bikeway improvements. That project is expected to start construction in early 2021. The Lentz Town Center Improvements Project is using Build Portland dollars to upgrade paving along the Foster Road Woodstock Boulevard couplet. The project also provides sidewalk, pedestrian crossing, and bikeway improvements, and is expected to start construction in June 2020. The North Lombard Main Street project is using the Build Portland dollars for pavement reconstruction on Lombard Street from North St. Louis to North Richmond Avenue. The project also includes crossing treatments, transit pad improvements, and curb extensions, and this project is expected to start construction in late 2020. The next 2 projects are citywide, with locations throughout the city, and the work is being completed on a continuous cycle of design and construction. The ADA-compliant corner ramp improvement project is using Build Portland dollars to complete ADA-compliant corner ramp improvements over the next 7 years. The ramps are prioritized by first addressing ramps requested by persons with disabilities, and then by risk, equity, and other measures such as access to transit. The Traffic Signal System Improvement Project is using Build Portland dollars for signal reconstruction and rapid flashing beacons across the city. And traffic signal improvements are prioritized by safety, equity, and asset condition. The last of the 7 projects is the Mount Scott Community Center rehabilitation. While still in pre-development, this project anticipates Build Portland dollars going towards the rehabilitation of the facility, which could include a number of the items shown on the slide. The project, once the scope is finalized, expects to start construction in summer 2022. The Phase 1 funding approach includes balancing when general fund is needed to fund debt service with the project progress to ensure the dollars are spent and to minimize the fees associated with taking on this debt. The limited tax revenue bonds were authorized last April, And based on the Phase 1 project spend projection, the Build Portland Phase 1 funding approach is to, one, issue a line of credit in fiscal year 1920 as the Phase 1 projects ramp up from pre-development and design into construction. We would replace that line of credit with the bond in late 2021-22 when the projects are projected to, one, need a significant amount of Build Portland dollars, and two, are well underway and committed to reach completion. This manages the city's risk by delaying taking on debt as long as possible and minimizing the fees and debt service. This also aligns with the expected timeline for returning revenue, some of which is intended to fund the debt service on the bond, as well as potentially fund future phases of Build Portland.
So could I just stop you there? Yeah. Because I think this is incredibly wonderful that Mayor Wheeler had the thought to take money that's coming back from tax increment financing districts and dedicate some of it, borrowing this money so that then we can get ahead a little, not going to get ahead, but we're going to really make a dent in these projects. This is brilliant. And I've worked with 3 mayors now, and you're the only one who's actually been able to figure out a way to address the infrastructure gap. Previously, we've said, oh, it's a horrible gap and it's getting bigger, and isn't that terrible? And you came up with a way that it's not going to keep getting worse. So I just want to really applaud that and explain that's why we're borrowing the money, because we're getting the money coming back from the tax increment financing districts, they're otherwise known as urban renewal areas. So when people said, well, we've got all these property taxes because we've taken care of some formerly blighted areas in some cases, what's the good of that? This is the good of that.
Thank you.
And I would have said that right up front if I was you. I mean, wait to bury your lead, Mayor. Sorry, do go on.
All right, no worries.
No, please, if you have more to add, by all means.
This is a rare moment for the mayor.
I don't even know how to handle it. Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that.
Welcome.
Where are we?
So as stated earlier, the Build Portland program is a multi-bureau partnership with program duties essentially split up as follows. The Chief Administrative Office leads the Build Portland program administration, which includes a number of items we'll discuss shortly. The City Budget Office leads the financial forecasting in regards to the program dollars available and the long-term projections for when returning revenue will be available for consideration for the next phase of projects. The Bureau of Revenue and Financial Services, and more specifically debt management, determines how to finance the Build Portland program, and in particular, how to manage the risk of Phase 1, which was initiated in anticipation of, but in advance of that returning revenue. And the infrastructure bureaus are responsible for the delivery of the project selection for Build Portland funding. So just as each Phase 1 project has project scope and costs, Build Portland as a program has administrative scope and costs. These include communication and outreach. So consider this an approach to community outreach and education, including why there's a maintenance gap, the goals and intentions of the Build Portland program and project progress, the coordination of the program across the multi-bureau partnership, which would include project progress tracking, any expected Build Portland collateral that might come out of the communication and outreach development that would need to be coordinated with project staff. So this could include signage at construction sites or groundbreaking events. And then aligning the project progress with the availability of funds and the evaluation and determination of when to initiate Phase 2. And with that initiation of Phase 2, the development of a long-term funding approach to those next phases of projects. And so finally, as we're here at the end of fiscal year 18-19, here is our work plan for fiscal year 19-20. So the Phase 1 projects will advance, and to highlight the first of the location-specific projects, which is expected to be the Lentz Town Center project, should start construction in late spring 2020. Debt management will also issue the line of credit later this fiscal year to fund those project expenditures. The team will initiate the communication and outreach approach with the selection of a consultant team to provide professional services. The citywide program administration and the multi-bureau partnership will continue. We expect the advisory committee to meet for quarterly program updates, and we will be back before you next spring in 2020 to provide the next annual update on the Build Portland program. And so that is the end.
Very good. Colleagues, any questions?
So, Mayor,
Commissioner Fish.
First of all, I want to echo what Commissioner Fritz said in terms of a innovative way of closing the gap. And I think you began the hearing by saying we have a $310 million annual funding gap.
Correct.
So I have two thoughts for next steps. One is that I am regularly reminded in communications I get from the public that there's a lot of confusion when it comes to our budgets about the difference between operating dollars and capital dollars and restricted dollars versus unrestricted dollars. And frankly, it takes a long time in this building to get to a point where you understand that with your own bureaus much. And so to expect the public to have an understanding of what we call the color of money and what can and can't be used for things is asking a lot. And then we use these numbers interchangeably, so we use the all-in number, including capital dollars, and sometimes we use the operating dollars. And so I have found there's a healthy amount of confusion in terms of bureaus and what we budget for. That's number one. Number two is I think we could do a much better job at budget time focusing in on capital budgets and how we plan by bureau to close the gap. So for example, as you noted earlier, the public utilities are in a unique situation because they have dedicated revenue. And they have a revenue stream that allows them to spend a lot of capital dollars to maintain the system. That's not true of parks, housing, or PBOT, for example. And so, Mayor, one of the things I'm going to follow up with you to sort of test drive is I think we should tweak our conversation about capital spending during the budget season so that we not only talk about the deficit in each bureau, but we also talk about all the strategies we're employing by bureau to close that gap. And some are different. I mean, PBOT goes out for bonds, PBOT goes out for gas tax increases, PBOT, according to the chart you gave us, gets the lion's share of the Build Portland money, and on and on and on. Well, I think a pie chart that showed how we're getting at that would be important. I guess what I'm saying is, I don't think we should look at Build Portland anymore as a separate initiative.
Right.
I think what we should do is tie it all together with all the capital spending and tell the story about how we're doing in meeting that deficit.
That's great.
Because that's what people are going to understand. They're not going to understand 5 or 6 one-offs. And again, the utilities are different because they have dedicated funding. And we wish that every bureau was funded in a way that allowed for such predictable decision-making. So I hope we try that and have a deeper dive in the budget season as to how by bureau we're going to tackle this capital spending deficit.
That's a great suggestion, Commissioner.
And then integrate all the different funding sources so that people get a sense in a pie chart what we're doing. But I appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Is there any public testimony on this item, Carla?
Yes, we have 2 people signed up,
Very good.
with Maggie and Jeanne Connett.
Whoever wants to go ahead.
Maggie, why don't you start,
Okay.
please?
I just want to say the Portlanders can't understand budgets.
Or pie charts. Or charts.
That's actually not what I said. I said that there's, just to be clear what I said, in the communication that I've been getting from a lot of people, there's confusion about the difference between operating dollars and capital dollars.
Are they from?
Dollars that are restricted and unrestricted. And I don't think we do a good enough job explaining the difference. That was my point. It has nothing to do with the public. It has to
Okay.
do with our ability to communicate those differences.
Oh, okay, all right, I'll buy that. Okay, all right. I just want to say, just like before, when you do infrastructure for like bicycle lanes and pedestrians, you can build a mid-size city for the amount of money you do for a four-lane freeway. So it's not the amount of money you need for infrastructure, it's how you spend it and what kind of infrastructure you're going to do, because we want to move to a greener way of life, a more human sense of proportion. Everybody that I've talked to, they want to just shut down the whole downtown area and turn it into a pedestrian and bicycle mall, because that's going to bring people in to actually buy stuff and support the economy, because nobody who drives around in a car stops and buys anything or stops in a store to eat. You know, it's the people who walk around and bicycle around and scooter around that buy things. So, and ride public transportation to the grocery store, they buy things. So, you know, people in cars, they go somewhere else because they've got a car and a full tank of gas. And so, you know, let's move on more pedestrian, more bicycle, more scooter, you know, areas. You know, I happen to think that we have all the laws that we need on hand that go all the way back to, you know, 16th century marine highway laws for, you know, covering all the laws for scooters and stuff and little neighborhood electric vehicles. So if you're going to work on infrastructure, go green, and, you know, don't be like Tesla. You know what Tesla does? He lectures his employees, build more, sell more, so that he can fly around in his fuel-based private jet and build fuel-based rockets. Who needs that? You know, buy from somebody who actually drives their own electric vehicle. So buy from people who are actually using their own stuff, please.
Thank you. Good morning.
Oh, you want to go? Okay. All right. I would like to beg the council's slight indulgence. That guy that came up here today, and he was talking about infrastructure, and it almost made me cry, because I remember back, I don't remember the last time martial law was called in St. John's, Oregon, but I can tell you why. There were two kids crossing the street trying to go to school, and they got hit by this big diesel truck because we had this S-curve in St. John's, and we just couldn't get the truckers to slow down for the kids. And two people died. That was the day we closed down St. John's and martial law came. That's the third time in my lifetime I've seen that. The whole reason why was because you guys, with all your infrastructure and all your stuff, and even though he said he lives right there, he sees the fatalities. Yeah, I see the faces of those two 10-year-old kids that died on their way to school, too. That was the beginning of the problem between Portland and St. John's, and this is how it started. Because people were dying, and you guys don't have enough infrastructure for it. I don't think any of you are actually for Portland and for Portlanders, and now I understand when I'm out there on the street and I'm talking and communicating with people who actually, the last little bit, that actually are from Portland, because 90% of it isn't anymore, man. I'm with her. I think we should all just quit all this, because everybody in St. John's own their own business. Hell, we've run books for years. We understand shit. We don't need no pie charts. We don't need none of that. We are smart, educated people. Do you realize how many educational facilities there are right here in Portland? We're not dumb people, man. And when I watch people like you do stuff like this, and I hear the word fatality again, why? Why? Why is this what you guys think of Portland and Portlanders? You don't even take human life seriously.
Thank you.
Is there any further public testimony on this item, Carla?
All who signed up.
Very good. This is a resolution. Please call the roll. Thank you.
Fish.
Carmen et al., thank you for the presentation. And again, I look forward to the budget process of finding a way to integrate all of our capital spending in a way that I think is clearer and helps us make better decisions going forward about priorities. So, aye.
Udaly.
I'll wait for her to exit. Also born and raised in Portland, but frankly think that's irrelevant when people come to give testimony. So Build Portland helps us accomplish our infrastructure priorities and deliver transformative projects in historically underserved areas, responding to both maintenance and safety needs. Perhaps one of the earlier commenters didn't notice that 6 of the 7 projects are heavily focused on improving pedestrian and/or bicycle infrastructure as well as accessibility. Maggie, you can sit down.
Maggie?
Yeah, go back to.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for your testimony.
We're taking a vote. You need to go return to your seat.
She's
Maggie,
City
she's the
staff.
presenter, the city staff.
I want to thank the mayor for prioritizing this investment in our infrastructure, and thanks to Tom Reinhardt and OMF and Carmen for developing and delivering this program. It's going to make a significant dent in the $3.2 billion of deferred maintenance that PBOT has, and I've inherited as the transportation commissioner. And since we don't get thanked for things that, how do I put this? I want to join the chorus of appreciation to the mayor for coming up with this plan, because it's extraordinary looking back how we haven't taken care of our infrastructure. And I don't think that commissioners, councils, or community members are going to look back and thank us for terrible things not happening, but we are really kind of doing hard, necessary work to serve the future of Portland and chipping away at that $3.2 billion. So I also want to thank PBOT staff for their leadership in project identification and development, in particular Director Chris Warner, Jeremy Patton, Emily Tritch, Zeph Wagner, and Shoshana Cohen. And thanks especially to PBOT's community advisors, Momoko Sounders and Tony Lamb, to PBOT's Budget Advisory Committee, modal committees, and the various other stakeholders that participated in this process. I vote aye.
So under Mayor Sam Adams, we were going through the recession and we managed to get through it, partly because of the stimulus package from President Obama and doing a lot of building then that helped. The only cranes in the air at that point were public projects. And then under Mayor Hales, we were recovering from the recession and we didn't have additional resources. Mayor Wheeler saw that we were going to have additional resources as the urban renewal areas, the tax increment financing districts, ended. And instead of saying, oh, good, let's start lots of new shiny projects, he said, let's borrow against that expected revenue so that we can get to these projects before they become even more expensive. And that's brilliant in many different ways. One in particular is that then paying back the debt is looking forward so that the future generations who will be benefiting on them, they will also be paying. It's good because it's paying with new money that's coming back into the system that wasn't there before. So nobody's going to be getting taxed more because of this program. And it's actually addressing the problem that we've had for decades, which is that because of Measure 5 and 47 and 50, we're not able to raise taxes in a way that overly burdens property owners. We don't have a sales tax, and so we've been limited in the amount of things that we have to do, given that a lot of the city's money goes into personnel and people doing the jobs that we do. So
I think this is an extraordinary program that we should be celebrating and shouting from the rooftops that it's succeeding. And thank you for bringing the annual report. I think it's really important to show that it's the Mount Scott roof and the other transportation projects that Commissioner Udaly just mentioned that are desperately in need, and that you are looking at which ones to do first with an equity lens. So I like everything about this program. Aye.
Wheeler?
Thank you. Excellent report, excellent update, and I want to thank all of the Bureau directors who are very actively engaged in this. This is truly a citywide effort, and a lot of people are putting a lot of time, energy, and effort into making sure that this works. And I think we're all keenly aware that there's a lot of eyeballs on it as well. So good work, good report. I vote aye. The resolution's adopted. Thank you very much. Next up is a first reading. Item number second reading 537.
Grant a 10-year franchise to New Singular Wireless PCS LLC for wireless communications services in the city.
Any further discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Fish.
Well, as we discussed the last time a similar issue came before council, we are preempted from preventing new technology, wireless technology, from coming into our community. We are left then with the opportunity to negotiate the best possible deal. This is the second deal that I can recall where we have negotiated more favorable terms than the feds had originally proposed. We're caught between a rock and a hard place, and for those who say, well, cast a dissenting vote as a protest vote, that would throw us back onto a regulatory framework which would get us a less favorable deal for Portland. And I don't think that is a good alternative. I wish we did not live in a world where we are preempted from dealing with the health aspects of new technology like 5G, but that has been a recurring problem here for as long as we've had cell phone towers, and the federal government has prevented us from looking at health aspects. We need to change that at the federal level, and then we can have more flexibility at the state level. Until that happens, the question is this a good deal for Portland in terms of what's been negotiated? And therefore, I vote aye.
Udaly?
Well, I share similar sentiments with Commissioner Fish. This may not be ideal. We're not working under an ideal set of circumstances. We've negotiated the best deal that we can for the city before we have something much worse forced upon us. I vote aye.
Fritz?
I agree with both my colleagues who've previously spoken. Thank you to the Office for Community Technology for your continued good work. Aye.
Wheeler?
Well, this council is on record urging the Federal Communications Commission to update and publish studies on the health effects of radio frequency emissions, and we're going to continue to aggressively push the FCC on this issue. The council has also been leading the nation in challenging the FCC's recent regulatory limits on our authority to manage local resources like the public right-of-way, for which the public has spent hundreds of millions of dollars, in which we spend millions of dollars every year managing. It's obviously a very challenging regulatory environment at the federal level, and staff has worked very hard to create partnerships with the wireless carriers who serve their residents. And I believe on balance, this AT&T franchise continues that partnership to the benefit of the public. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Colleagues, I'm going to shift things around a little bit. Item 542, we have an out-of-town guest, and Mustafa has informed me they're on a bit of a timeline here, so please read 542.
Amend transient lodgings tax code related to the administration of the short-term rental laws, require short-term rental platforms to either enter into a pass-through registration, data sharing agreement, or choose listing locations from a short-term rental registry created by the city.
Colleagues, the City of Portland has been a national leader in short-term rental policy setting, working with platforms such as Airbnb and HomeAway. Portland was the first city in the nation to strike a tax collection deal with short-term rental platforms back in the year 2014. In that same year, Portland was also one of the first cities in the nation to legalize short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods. Since 2014, Portland has been working hard to gain higher compliance with its permitting requirements around short-term rentals. These permits require basic inspection to ensure smoke alarms and appropriate egress and rental properties are in place, and other matters like reasonable neighborhood notification. We've had years of discussions and litigation with short-term rental platforms about increasing permitting compliance, and we're still experiencing very low compliance rates. Today, they are below 30%. While all platforms are now collecting and remitting our hotel motel taxes, which is an improvement, few have shown any real interest in aiding in enforcement of city regulations. The ordinance before you today sets a clear path forward to gain higher compliance with our permits. Short-term rental platforms will have a choice: either enter into a data sharing agreement with the city to provide basic information about the location of short-term rentals in Portland, or facilitate bookings and transactions only for those short-term rentals that are on the list of permitted locations provided by the city. Revenue Director Thomas Lanham is here and will walk us through the ordinance. Good morning.
Good morning,
good
Mayor,
afternoon
and-
at this point.
Good afternoon, then, Mayor and City Council. I'm Thomas Lanham with the Revenue Division of the Bureau of Revenue and Financial Services, and joining me is Mike Liefeld from the Bureau of Development Services. You summarized it very well, Mayor, and I know it's already been a long day. I don't need to repeat a lot of that. I guess what I would say is what's changed recently is a panel of the Ninth Circuit ruled on an ordinance that was passed by the city of Santa Monica, California. And that ruling upheld Santa Monica's ordinance. And this ordinance really mirrors the Santa Monica approach that has been tested in that court. And so, in short, it sets up a registry of locations that have already got a permit, type A or B ASTR permit that Mike will speak about in a moment. And those are the only locations that can legally be advertised, and that a short-term rental platform could receive fees for service for helping to book. So that's door number one. Door number two that we're still allowing the platforms to take, if they so choose, is that full-blown data sharing agreement, including transactional data, so we know how many nights each of these locations are booked. I will stop there and turn it over to Mike.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Mike Liefeld. I'm with the Bureau of Development Services Property Compliance Program. My team administers the BDS accessory short-term rental permit requirements as required by the Portland Zoning Code and performs complaint-based enforcement for violations of the city's ASTR regulations. During my short testimony, I will refer to accessory short-term rentals as ASTRs. BDS supports the proposed ordinance as it will greatly assist us in utilizing existing enforcement resources to ensure compliance with the city's ASTR regulations. The ordinance provides two paths for booking agents and operators to partner with the city to ensure that the carefully crafted and balanced ASTR regulations adopted in 2014 are met. A pass-through registration program can have benefits for both booking agents and the city. An important element of a pass-through agreement includes the ability to receive transactional data regarding ASTR operations. Transactional data is needed to help identify alleged commercial vacation rental operations that are an affront of the Portland Zoning Code. These operations can best be described as commercial vacation rentals with no permanent resident and not meeting the underlying zoning requirements that the use of the property remain residential or used as primary residence for an individual or family. The current ASTR regulations allow ASTR rentals 365 nights a year and do not require the required primary resident to be on site during any guest stay. Without transactional data, ASTR applications are essentially treated the same, with the city not having any additional information to best assign enforcement resources to tackle illegal commercial vacation rentals that have been and continue to be the main driver for existing BDS enforcement action. Based on our experience in responding to 635 ASDR complaints since 2014, and through issuance of 240 ASDR enforcement citations, we know that transactional data, that is, the frequency of guest bookings, is a strong indicator of a potential ASDR violation, even if the required ASDR permit has been issued. For BDS to achieve the goal of limiting illegal commercial ASTR operations, transactional data is needed. The second path provided to booking agents and operators allows industry partners to utilize short-term rental registries that only promote and advertise fully permitted and legal ASDR operations within the City of Portland. This approach will greatly improve compliance with the city's ASTR regulations, as non-permitted ASTR operations will need to make an immediate decision whether to embark on the required ASTR permitting process or simply discontinue the use. Since 2014, BDS has received much feedback regarding perceived barriers to compliance with the city's ASTR regulations. It is BDS's belief that the primary reason for the great disparity between the number of active ASTR listings on booking agents' online platforms compared to the low number of permitted ASTR properties within the city is simply due to the operator's inability to permit a legal operation. Frequent cited violations confirm that common operational violations surrounding offering a whole house rental that violates the maximum number of guests and bedrooms available for rent, as well as utilizing a vacation home without a primary resident, is the main driver. The ability to only allow ASTR bookings of fully permitted properties will drastically increase the compliance rate with the city's ASTR regulations. BDS supports the proposed ordinance as it will increase our ability to administer, monitor, and enforce the city's current ASTR regulations. I'm going to remain available for questions that might come up regarding administration of the program, and I thank you for the opportunity to provide comments.
Very good. Commissioner Fish.
Thank you. Mayor, looking back over my 10 years plus of service on this council, nothing has been more frustrating on a regulatory side than our continuing challenge to get the short-term rental industry and companies like Uber and Lyft and other TNCs to follow the rules that we've established that were designed to protect consumers and workers. And I think it has also been frustrating for the public to watch us fall short of ensuring public safety. When you say at the beginning of this hearing that less than 30% of short-term rental units are in compliance, what you're saying is that at any given moment, the city can't vouch for approximately 70% of the units that are being marketed online, which means we can't say for sure to a family or to anyone accessing these rentals that they're safe. We can't say for sure that there's adequate egress and ingress, that there's a smoke detector, that there's other things that are required. It has been really eye-opening to watch this new, I guess they call it the gig economy, operate. Because the gig economy has thumbed its nose at local regulators for a long time. And that's basically their business model. And in fact, as we speak today, Lyft and Uber are still working overtime in Salem to preempt the city of Portland from regulating short TNCs. So all the progress we've made in setting a basic standards that protect workers and consumers are at risk because the legislature may, in the name of providing statewide access to these services, may throw in a preemption which limits our ability to look out for our local citizens, our local community members. So if this is a preview of the new gig economy, I would say God help us, because there's a pattern of behavior. And it's contemptuous of local control, contemptuous of local regulations, and constantly using the courts to frustrate our ability to do reasonable regulations. And that, after all, is a cornerstone of our responsibility as local legislatures, is to make sure people are safe. So I am encouraged that we have a Ninth Circuit decision from Santa Monica that is on our side, although I'm reminded that I think the Ninth Circuit has the highest overturn rate in the country of any circuit. So we should hope that the Supreme Court doesn't take that case up and lets the Ninth Circuit decision stand. And Thomas, I know that you have been working hard to break through these barriers. And I appreciate what you said, that the principal barriers that people have faced isn't the fact that we've created burdensome regulations as a general matter. That's the rhetoric we hear, because any regulations are by definition burdensome, and that's the line used by these companies. But you've pointed out that many of the units would not qualify as short-term rentals under our code because the operators aren't following the law. And by not following the law, let's be very clear, we're not talking about some abstraction here. We're talking about people being less safe. And if tomorrow the headline was, city backs off regulating local motels and hotels and doesn't pay attention to basic life safety issues, or the Fire Bureau announces we're no longer checking public venues and we're going to, caveat emptor, that's going exactly the wrong direction. But as frustrating as it has been, I think we're now at a moment where we can break through and get to the point we want, which is a much higher rate of compliance, so that we can sincerely say to people who are coming to our community that they are safe. And it's a no-brainer, but I just think people need to understand this has been a war waged by these gig companies that use every tool, including the federal courts, to frustrate local communities from doing reasonable regulations. And it has been enormously frustrating serving on this council and seeing the number of ways that we've been thwarted. And I sincerely hope that the legislature doesn't preempt our ability to regulate TNCs going forward. The bill, Susan McLean's bill, apparently is still on life support. It's going to come down to a question of whether the leadership of the legislature wants to see that bill get a hearing and ultimately see the light of day at the end. It would unravel years of work that we've done to protect workers and consumers, and it would effectively shut down the wage board that the Portland Bureau of Transportation has been working so hard to set up, which would address the concerns of drivers who, under current law, aren't sure whether they're independent contractors or employees. So I appreciate that we're at this moment where we think we have a legal hook. Thomas, I think we want to make sure you have the resources you need to aggressively move forward on this, but it's taken us way too long to get to this point. And I don't point any fingers to your shop, but I have learned some painful lessons about how some of these new gig companies view local regulators, and it's shameful. And it's led to a dismal compliance rate of under 30%, which is really a shocking number. So I thank you for bringing this forward, and I'm encouraged that, armed with a circuit court decision, we may actually be able to close the loop on this.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Commissioner Udaley.
I'm going to save most of my comments for the vote, which I believe is coming next week, but I just want to signal my general support, my appreciation to Mike at BDS and to Revenue Division and to the mayor. It was one of my biggest frustrations and disappointments that I didn't get to make much progress on this issue while I was the commissioner in charge of BDS. We know beyond a doubt that short-term rental platforms are contributing to a global housing crisis, including our housing crisis right here in Portland. The city implemented some common sense regulations to try to mitigate those impacts on our rental markets, as well as protect consumers and neighborhoods. But given that thousands of houses, rooms, and ADUs that were formerly rented out long-term are now on the short-term rental market. There is, again, no denying that it is impacting and accelerating our housing crisis. And the denial of these platforms, in particular Airbnb, which is the only group that I have met with, would be laughable if it weren't so offensive. So I'm going to support aggressive regulation and enforcements because we need to take care of our residents and our neighborhoods. People have plenty of places to stay when they come to our town.
Thank you. Director Lanham, it's my understanding you have some invited testimony. Is that correct? Additional
Yeah, I
invited
believe there
testimony?
is some testimony.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
So I can just go to the public list now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Carla, how many people do we have signed up?
Oh, I think just one person, I think Maggie left. We have Charles Bridge Crane Johnson.
Is he here? I don't see him. Very good. Any further comments, colleagues?
Is there a reason we're not doing this as an emergency?
Great question. There's some irony here, given the long history that you were talking about, Commissioner Fish, and understand we want aggressive enforcement, but we do need a little bit of time. We want to give the platforms the usual second reading in the 30 days. I had conversations with Airbnb and HomeAway about compliance. I think it's fair to say they get it now, but they'll need time to notify hosts and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. And Mustafa, are you trying to get a message to me before I say what I'm going to say? We do have two people who are invited testimony. Okay, please bring them up. I can see you madly working your iPhone there. Welcome. 3 minutes each. Name for the record, please.
Robert will be going first.
Rob Herder from Host to Host. And good morning, Mayor Wheeler and council. First, we appreciate Tyler Wallace and others in the Revenue Division reaching out to us and inviting us to give comment and put on the ordinance before it was finalized. And we appreciate also Amanda Watson in your office inviting us to testify here today. Now, Host to Host is a local nonprofit trade association that advocates for hosts who welcome travelers into our homes. We wanted to be able to speak for ourselves, recognizing that cities often hear only from platforms such as Airbnb and HomeAway. We use those platforms, but our interests often differ. Our association fully supports short-term rental hosts being permitted, paying occupancy taxes, and meeting reasonable regulatory requirements. We provide continual educational opportunities to our members to enhance their hospitality skills, but also to understand city requirements. And I'm pleased to be here with my host-to-host colleague, Shannon Hiller-Webb, who will give a more personal side of this story in a minute. The pass-through registration, or PTR, was approved by council here a year ago, and we've been expecting it ever since. And at this point, we do accept that the city needs the proposed STR registry in order to bring about this pass-through registration. We're concerned about privacy, considering the bad behavior that can result from making the registry public, including transactional data. But we've been assured by the Revenue Division and the Mayor's office that at least the financial information will be kept completely confidential. Overall, we support the ordinance because it seems to be a path towards removing unpermitted listings, especially unpermitted whole house listings that would affect the housing crisis. I will note that the testimony that we heard from Mike at BDS, there is one other side to that, and that is often the very best hosts with the very best return rates from their guests will be hosts who rent almost all the nights of the year. Those can be our very best hosts. Host to Host supports reasonable regulatory controls of the short-term market, and to that end, we'd like to take a minute to address two short-term rental issues that don't depend on the registry or pass-through registration, but they're relevant. And first, A regressive per night fee was created a year ago by Ordinance 189-031. We testified at the time that assessing this $4 a night tax as a flat rate fee would create a discriminatory hardship for the home sharers with the least expensive listings.
Mayor, can we extend an extra minute or two?
Let's go, because I'd like to hear what you have to say. And this is invited testimony anyway, so Carla, you don't need to time it.
Since August 1st, 2018, a traveler considering a $40 a night listing faces 25% in occupancy taxes. And it's probably the highest in the nation for any hospitality provider. The highest occupancy tax rate in the country should not be assessed on the lowest earners in Portland. We're proud that we're impacting the Housing Investment Fund. We still don't think that short-term rentals among hospitality providers in Portland should be shouldering this alone. But either way, we don't want to accept the regressive aspect of the fee as being permanent. And we ask that council readdress this issue with Revenue Division to identify a new approach. Second, we want to bring to your attention the conversion of long-term housing to hotel space. This admittedly is not a topic that we're well versed in, but entire floors of some apartment and condo buildings originally constructed for long-term housing appear to now be operating as short-term rentals. And we wonder why the city would allow this type of conversion, or at least why it might be done easily or quietly in the midst of this housing crisis. And if there's not a formal, transparent policy governing these conversions, we recommend that one be developed. And now I'd like to ask Shannon to personalize the story.
Sir, before you do, can I just say,
Commissioner Fish.
thank you, for being here.
Thank you.
I remembered your other testimony. Thank you for the clarity of your testimony, and I appreciate your focus on privacy concerns, which I think is very important. I do recall you objecting to what you previously also referred to as the regressive per night fee. This idea of converting floors of a building to short-term, we saw that at the Burnside Bridgehead in the yards, and I'm glad you've flagged that issue again, because that does not seem consistent with any of our rules. But you referred to your support for, reasonable regulations. And I guess it's important, since you represent the operators and you're independent of industry, is it the view of your organization that the city's current regulatory framework is burdensome?
I don't know that I've heard that.
That's all I need. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Hurt. We appreciate it. Good
Hi.
afternoon.
Thank you for your time. My name
Thank
is
you.
Shannon, and I just thought I'd share a little bit about how I got here. I began hosting in 2012 when I was starting a small business that was high risk. It was called Green Zebra Grocery, and at the time I wanted a safety net, and hosting became an option for me that I felt was going to be a safety net I needed. As you know, Green Zebra has grown to be a solid local business supporting the community. And while I remain an owner, a proud owner, I've also ventured out as a consultant to help grow other local makers and grow their small businesses as a consultant. And hosting has been able to help me weather those lean times in both of those businesses to help keep me going. I would also like to state that it's afforded me opportunities to give my time to the community in a volunteer capacity. I've come before you in support of Macadam Ridge. That was a 5-year operation that was extremely time-consuming, that this hosting allowed me to make those decisions to give to that neighborhood association, my neighborhood association. I also gave my time to the Sorrel neighborhood and their land use concerns. I'm an active member on the Sweeney Coalition, and this is one of the things that helps me. I also recently had a health issue that made me bedbound for 2 months, and I was only able to pay my mortgage because of this auxiliary income. So for me, I've been involved, like I said, since 2012, and I've always been a supporter of legalization. And I became connected to the people who founded Host to Host early on. And it was through that organization that I learned the single greatest population of hosts are older single women looking to augment their income from their retirement so that they can keep their homes and age in place. And that ignited me to organize the group to come before you last summer when we testified. It was during that testimony where we asked for a voice and a seat at the table that Amanda Fritz so lovingly suggested that we have a board seat at Travel Portland. And I can tell you that I occupy that seat proudly since January. And while that relationship is in its infancy, I've already seen the dramatic impacts it's had for both of our organizations and how we've been sharing about the travel industry as a whole that we may not have been privy to in the data set. And we've been sharing with them our expertise in our segment of the industry as short-term rental hosts. So Jeff and his team has been overwhelmingly welcoming, and as an example of their support, they are now lending marketing support to an organization called FabStays. FabStays is a new LGBTQ-friendly short-term rental platform that shares those hosts collectively from all platforms that offer the community a safe place to stay. This organization is based in Florida, highlighting short-term rentals all over the world, and has selected Portland for its national launch this month. Because of Host to Host and because of our members' overwhelming support of this community. We are primarily an education-based organization, and we strive to have responsible ambassadors for the city and our communities. Travel Portland has provided, and Airbnb has sponsored opportunities for our hosts on civil rights, implicit bias, racial equity training that hundreds of our hosts have attended. Our organization is growing, and we are continuing to engage our hosts with best practices, community engagement, and monthly meetups. This summer, we have a planned panel on homelessness and engaging stakeholders to bring holistic perspective to the sensitive and complicated concern facing our city. We are also committed to highlighting a local experience for our guests, and we are launching a local guidebook that shares the best of the best in our city beyond the 15 neighborhoods commonly marketed to. We have 94 neighborhoods, and our hosts are in most of those neighborhoods, so we're sharing the businesses from all of them. So we thank you for supporting our voices in this conversation, providing us a seat at the table. We support this ordinance and the city's continued effort to equitably address this industry and oversight in its legalization.
Well, thank you, Shannon. We really appreciate it. And Rob, thank you both. And thanks to Host to Host and your active engagement in this process. It's great to hear your perspective, and we appreciate your taking the time to share it this morning.
And by the way, thank you for opening a green zebra on Broadway and PSU. It's, if you took a poll in my office, it's our favorite salad bar, so
Thank you.
it's within walking distance, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Carla, how many people do we have signed up for public testimony?
It was Charles, Bridgecrane, and Maggie, and I believe they both left.
Okay, and just due to some time constraints, I'm going to limit further public testimony to 2 minutes each. So if people are going to be testifying on things, think 2 minutes, because we will lose our quorum if we don't move forward expeditiously. So this is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Next item, 538, please.
We did that.
You already did
Oh,
538?
no, 538, nope,
I don't think so.
Gotta find it. I lost it. Sorry. 538, accept bid of Just Bucket Excavating, Inc. for the North Greeley Avenue Multi-Use Path Project for $1,334,193.
Did he just leave? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, City Council. I'm Lester Spittler, the city's Chief Procurement Officer. I'm here to present the Chief Procurement Officer report for the Portland Bureau of Transportation North Greeley Avenue Multi-Use Path Project. On January 9th, the council approved ordinance number 189343 for procurement services to competitively solicit for the project. On April 23rd, we issued the invitation to bid and received 4 bids. The lowest responsive and responsible bidder is from Just Bucket Excavating Incorporated. Just Bucket is a certified firm with the Certification Office for Business Inclusion and Diversity. They are identified by the state as being African American male-owned, And they have proposed to meet our aspirational goal of 20% for subcontractor and supplier utilization, and they're actually exceeding that goal, and will be using 24.1% certified subcontractors. Those certified subcontractors are Chicks of All Trades, LLC, Igami Construction Incorporated, and Faison Construction Incorporated. Chicks of All Trades, LLC is a disadvantaged, minority-owned, and women-owned business enterprise. Their ownership is being identified as female and Hispanic by the state. Agami Construction Incorporated is certified as a disadvantaged, minority, women-owned, and emerging small business, and they are identified as being female-owned and Asian Pacific by the state. And Faison Construction is a disadvantaged, minority-owned business enterprise and is African-American, male-owned. Just Bucket is proposing to self-perform 30.7% of the work, and the other non-certified subcontractors are listed in the report for your information. Just Bucket is located in Albany, Oregon, and again, is certified by the state of Oregon. They have a current City of Portland business tax registration and are in full compliance with all the city's contracting requirements. If there's any questions, I have the Portland Bureau of Transportation project manager here. If not, I recommend that you accept this report and authorize execution of the contract.
Move to accept the report.
Second?
Carla, please call the roll.
Fish,
Aye.
Fritz,
Thank you. That's a really good presentation. I appreciate the extra detail in the written documents that we got. Aye.
Udaly.
Same. Thank you. I vote aye. The report is accepted. Carla, can you please read 539 along with 543?
Yes, 539, accept bid of Keystone Contracting, Inc. for the Luther Road Restoration Project for $1,827,000. And 543, amend ordinance to authorize contract with the lowest responsible bidder and provide payment for construction of the Luther Road Restoration Project number E10854 in the amount of $1,827,000.
Thank you. Commissioner Fitch, do you want to
Nope. We'll
give
take
comment?
the
Okay, we'll move right to staff.
Staff report.
Okay.
City Council, thank you. Good afternoon. Lester Spitler, Chief Procurement Officer. I'm here to present the Chief Procurement Officer report for this project. On March 20th, 2019, Council approved the authorizing ordinance number 189430 for us to competitively solicit for the project. In that ordinance, it capped the amount for which my position could sign the contract for, and that's why these two items are being read together. The amended ordinance is to do away with that cap and allow council to accept the report at the lowest responsive and responsible bid. So the estimate for this project was $1.75 million. The level of confidence was high. On April 23rd, 2019, Procurement Services opened the bids from the invitation to bid, and we received 3 responses. The lowest responsive bid is from Keystone Contracting Incorporated in the amount of $1,827,000. That bid is 4.4% over the estimate, so not too bad. The project, as usual, had a 20% aspirational goal for subcontractor and supplier utilization. Keystone Contracting is meeting that goal. They're using one certified subcontractor, and that company's name is Brenda Lee Fairbanks, DBA Daybreak Construction. They're a disadvantaged business, minority-owned business, and a woman-owned business enterprise certified with the state's office, and they will be performing flagging, excavation, soil clearing, and grubbing in the amount of $369,000. They are listed as by the state as a woman-owned Hispanic business. Keystone Contracting is located in La Center, Washington, and is not a state-certified contractor. They do have a current City of Portland business tax registration and are in full compliance with all of the city's contracting requirements. I have the project manager in the audience in case there's any questions. If not, the recommendation is for council to accept the report and authorize execution of the contract.
Commissioner Udaly, you gave me the opportunity to make an opening comment. I do, in fact, have a very brief opening comment, so if I could.
The mayor is back, so you're going to have to address.
So It puts it in context, so Mayor,
Yeah.
with your forbearance.
Yep.
This ordinance follows up on council's March 20th authorization of the Luther Road Restoration Project. Environmental services through this contract will restore Johnson Creek near Luther Road to stabilize the stream bed and eroded banks. That will protect a major city asset, a 66-inch combined sewer and stormwater pipe that runs through the creek and serves the Lentz area. The restoration will also improve stream flow and salmon habitat while protecting nearby properties from erosion. Thank you.
Very good.
I move the report.
Second?
Commissioner Fish moves the procurement report. Commissioner Daly seconds it. Any further discussion on the report? Please call the roll on the report.
Fish.
Aye.
Udaly.
Lester, I want to thank you for the additional demographic information on the ESB contractors. I think it's something that the council and the public appreciates knowing, and I believe it's going to help dispel maybe some concerns about who exactly is represented in that category. I vote aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The report's accepted. And Commissioner, it's my understanding 543 has also been read.
Yes.
Has public testimony been taken?
Yes. We
Yes.
called for it.
Okay, so public testimony is done. It's an emergency ordinance. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Please read item 540. I'm going to return it.
540, amend the policy for the Minority Evaluator Program to increase the threshold for which it applies from $150,000 to $1 million.
Colleagues, I'd like to return this to my office. Without objection, read 541, please.
541, amend city code to reflect current structure, operations, and responsibilities in the Office of Management and Finance.
Colleagues, the Office of Management and Finance has updated sections of the city code to reflect the many organizational changes that they've undergone in recent years. The bulk of the changes are located within a restructured Chapter 3.15. This describes the organization's functions and duties of the Office of Management and Finance, but also include referential cleanups to the area of code that were affected by their efforts. I'd like to welcome Deputy Chief Administrative Officer Carmen Merlo back to the rostrum. She's here to provide us more information on these code changes.
Thank you,
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome back.
Thanks. Commissioners, Carmen Merlo, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. With me is Michelle Koenig-North with our Strategic Projects and Opportunities team. And I'm here today to present updates that reflect organizational changes implemented by the Chief Administrative Officer to the Office of Management and Finance. In March of 2018, the CAO, Tom Reinhardt, dissolved the Bureau formerly known as BIBS, the Bureau of Internal Business Services. BIBS was previously made up of 4 divisions: Fleet, Facilities, Risk, and Printing and Distribution. As part of the new organizational structure, Fleet and Facilities were combined into a new division of Asset Management, or DAM. I can't compete with the Poop Master 6000, but I have a joyous time saying the DAM Manager. Under the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer, Printing and Distribution was moved over to the Bureau of Technology Services, and Risk was moved to the Bureau of Revenue and Financial Services. Other changes made to Chapter 3.15 include adding the new position of Deputy Chief Administrative Officer that was created by Council in November 2017, and establishing the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer as a major organizational component to the operations of OMF, clarifying that the CAO had the ability to appear in small claims court to defend and represent the city, as well as enter into non-disclosure agreements, and that these authorities could be further delegated by the CAO to appropriate individuals in OMF. It also clarified the authority of the Chief Technology Officer to enter into technology-related non-disclosure agreements, and for the Chief Financial Officer to enter into financial-related non-disclosure agreements. Finally, it moved Enterprise Business Solutions into the Bureau of Technology Services. We made significant edits to Chapter 3.15 to reflect best practices found in newer city codes. Some of these improvements include the addition of a purpose, definitions, and functions section, ensuring authorities and responsibilities were delegated at the appropriate level, and removing specific references to funds or buildings managed so that council can assign or reassign those roles and functions without the need for code updates. Additional housekeeping changes were made to remove references to the Bureau of Internal Business Services and ensure delegations of authority previously issued by the Director of BIBS were transferred to appropriate parties. It also removed inaccurate references to OMF bureaus or divisions. And then finally, we know that we have more work to do, and we anticipate coming back to you in the near future with additional code revisions that are unrelated to the dissolution of BIBS. As one example, with the establishment of the new Office for Community Technology as a standalone bureau, we'll need to update additional code sections to reflect the new organizational structure, and look forward to working with OCT staff to bring these code changes to council. Finally, I do want to thank Michelle Kunick-North, Josh Greger, and Diana Shiplet for all their work in helping to affect and Linda Law, to affect these changes in code. So happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Very good. Is there any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Okay, very good. With that, this is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for your work on that. Next item is 544.
Authorize two-year grant agreements with 7 youth-serving organizations in support of the Teen Collaborative Initiative not to exceed $560,000 and per grant not to exceed $80,000.
Colleagues, this is a second reading of an ordinance. There's already been a presentation and public testimony. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. 545, also a second reading.
Increase fee schedule for the Office of Community and Civic Life Noise Office for noise variance applications in the amount of 5% as permitted by Code Section 18.14.020B.
Any further discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Udaly.
Well, thank you to the Civic Life Noise Program and the Noise Review Board. Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. Ordinance is adopted. That leaves us with the consent agenda, item 526. Who pulled it?
This was pulled by a community member.
Do we know who?
They wanted to be anonymous.
Okay, very good. Read it.
I can tell you who did it. I did it.
Okay, it's very good. No worries. It doesn't matter. Go
Item
ahead.
526, grant a franchise to XO Communication Services LLC for communications services and facilities for a period of 10 years.
Elizabeth, are you here to staff on this issue? Yeah, would you like to go ahead and give us a brief presentation, then we'll hear public testimony? Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Oh, we're in the afternoon already. Mayor, Commissioners, my name is Elizabeth Perez. I'm the current Acting Director for the Office for Community Technology. This is a franchise for XO Communication Services to provide wireline, telephone, internet access, and internet-based network services for small and medium-sized businesses. Now, I looked over the testimony that was written in response to this franchise. Many of them were concerned about 5G. I can tell you it does not provide or build wireless sites and does not provide any wireless services, 3G, 4G, or 5G. The franchise was first agreed to in 2000. It was granted to NextLink Oregon, doing business as XO. It was a 10-year franchise. It has been extended 6 times, and this is the first time that we have renegotiated with staff for another 10-year franchise.
Very good. Any further questions of Elizabeth? Why don't we take public testimony? Maybe that'll generate some additional questions. How many people do we have signed up, Carla?
I have 6 people signed up.
Very good. 2 minutes each. Name for the record.
Okay, the first 3, please come on up, are Robert Philip Robbins, Michelle Blexius, and Barry Sanders. Okay, then let's go with Anne Oliver. Anne Marie, sorry. I should know your name, sir.
Good afternoon, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners, guests. Roberta Phillip Robbins, Executive Director, Digital Commonwealth Alliance, an organization bringing leadership and resources to build community self-reliance through local control and ownership of digital and physical assets. I encourage you to review our submitted public comments dated May 22nd, 2019, and I invite you to work with us on those recommendations proposed in those comments. The City of Portland's top priority should be to support municipal broadband as it is a true solution to digital inclusion and will allow Portlanders access to affordable, net neutral, and reliable internet. We request that the city deny the franchise agreements referenced today, as we can all agree not all laws have been good or just. Dozens of cities across the U.S. have said no to the telecoms, and this body should remember its history as a leader and innovator and stand up to big telecoms. Given the emergency franchise agreement already in place for a full year and the pending litigation against the FCC, there is no reason to rush this process. We request that you require robust public notice for all permits, especially 5G installations, although I learned today that this one does not necessarily include 4 or 5G. The city should draft stronger aesthetic standards before finalizing the franchise agreement. The FCC does not limit your ability to look into this. And as you consider this franchise agreement and the likelihood of others, many, many others, the city must maintain its responsibility and ability to continue to regulate aesthetics of proposed telecommunications equipment. The FCC has allowed governments to put forth aesthetic standards, and the City of Portland should do so. We request that the city take the time to set these standards before moving forward with this and other franchise agreements. And also the city needs to study the potential negative impacts to property values and to public health. We encourage you to consider, thank you, the potential liability for harm to public health, the environment, and property, and what its plan is to address those costs and its own potential liability shall citizens proceed with any class action suits in response.
Thank you,
Thank you.
appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Shall I begin?
Yes, sir.
When each of you assumed office, you vowed to protect the people of Portland, their safety and their well-being. I feel let down. I feel sad, bereft, and even a bit frightened. I'm sad about the lack of an open democratic process. I feel bereft about a political system that does not guarantee fairness. And worst of all, I'm frightened. Frightened that the democratic impulse is fast draining from our republic. I didn't expect to see those principles set aside in the city of Portland. You're letting contracts for the deployment of 5G wireless technology throughout the city without sufficiently considering the health and safety of its inhabitants, without informing residents that this is taking place, without anything close to a town hall informational meeting. Indeed, in the 2 resolutions for letting wireless contracts with XO and Singular, that is with Verizon and AT&T, the phrase 5G does not appear. That's worrisome to me, because I know it's going to happen. Mayor Wheeler, members of the council, the Oregon Revised Statute 192.620 states explicitly, the Oregon form of government requires an informed public, aware of the deliberations and decisions of governing bodies and the information upon which such decisions are made. It is the intent of ORS 192.6 that the decisions of governing bodies be arrived at openly. I've been a professor for close to 60 years. I've been a research professor for 60 years. If an experiment came to me in my classroom with possibility of side effects affecting health and, in fact, other living things like birds, I would be remiss in not investigating. As a deeply concerned resident of the city of Portland who resents the lack of an open process and clear procedure, I have no choice but to file my complaint with the Office of Ombudsman pursuant to the city's charter, code, and policies, section 2509D, voice my concerns about this precipitous procedure.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Anne Marie Oliver. I'd first like to applaud Commissioner Nick Fish for making Avitrol and other avicides in the city off the table. I never knew this was even happening, like so much else. And so I applaud this measure. I would also urge you to ban pesticides from Portland schools, from city parks, all of them, and from playing fields. On to the matter of 5G. EXO, as you know, in a $1.8 billion purchase by Verizon, was created, one of its major reasons for having been created, and this merger or buyout or whatever it was with Verizon was to accelerate 5G technologies, fifth generation wireless technologies. We have many concerns. The endeavor to push through and accelerate fifth generation wireless technologies, despite the fact that they have never been tested, something admitted to by this group here. And thus we're talking about a live experiment, is an absolutely anti-political move. That is to say, it is not subject to the processes of politics. That is to say, challenge, contest, and negotiation. Perhaps it is for this reason that many politicians and others now simply turn to the very industries that will benefit financially from the installation of these new technologies. Such a retreat from what is obviously necessary can only result in catastrophe. One of the greatest dangers facing us today is an essential oblivion, as well as the obvious exemption of technology from the realm of thought. We have asked for study on the matter of 5G. We have asked for study sessions. We have asked for town halls. We have asked for delays for public input. We've asked that you let people know what you are doing with regards to this matter.
How much more time do you need to read your comments?
I have pages and pages. I would
No,
like
but
at
your
least
testimony, because you and Barry have been waiting a long time. How much additional time do you need?
probably a couple more minutes.
Here, could we give her an additional minute?
Sure, certainly.
We have asked for a moratorium on what this council, along with the military, continues to call the deployment. People should pay attention to this term, the deployment of 5G and their concomitant technologies until further scientific, independent, non-industry funded study and research is carried out, and until common sense, rationality, and ethics take the place of fear, greed, and thoughtlessness. We join thousands of teachers, physicians, activists, scientists, environmentalists, and people across the country from all walks of life in making this demand. Given the consequences for ourselves and for all posterity, it is an eminently reasonable and absolutely necessary demand. Yet what we have seen in response to this call is, in my opinion, disingenuousness, obfuscation, falsehoods, and misdirection. We have not been seen, and we have not been heard. Not only have we not been seen and not heard, again, many people calling the City Hall have been given false or misleading information. I'm sorry to say, but I find this absolutely unacceptable.
Great, thank you.
Mayor Wheeler, a point of personal privilege. Can I have 2 minutes to speak from my heart rather than paper?
Actually, no, and you've done so very eloquently in the past, but I don't want to lose our quorum because we have to come back here shortly, and I don't want to lose the quorum.
That's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate.
Well,
Why does a
sorry.
Verizon shill get almost unlimited time and actually concerned citizens
That is
have
actually
to watch this
that is
clock?
actually an employee of the City of Portland. She is the interim director
No,
of the
no, I'm not
Office of
talking
Community
about Ms.
Technology.
Perez.
Your
I'm
time
not
is up.
talking
Thank
about
you.
Ms. Perez.
Please have your seat. Next three, please. I'm not disrespectful. You know the council rules.
I disagree.
Please, your time is up. I'm asking you to take your seat or you will be asked to leave.
You're interested in one telecom that you are.
The next three, please.
The last two
Excuse
are
me, you are in violation. I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
David Morrison and Coleman Garrity.
You don't have to ask me to leave. I'm leaving. This is real.
Folks, you all had your chance at the microphone. Now let's give some other people the opportunity to be heard. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Thank you.
May I begin now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My name is Coleman Garrity, and I oppose this measure 526 on a general principle against the involvement of telecommunications corporations in Portland proper. Now, this measure has been repeated 6 times. Is that correct? If that is the case, then I think that we should reasonably assess the impact that that has had on our Portland community in ways that do not necessarily relate to 5G technology as such. If the corporation's impact on the Portland community has been beneficial, then absolutely the ordinance should be repeated. If that is not the case that has been beneficial to the Portland community, then it should not be repeated. And I only ask that there are certain members of the Portland community to be recognized that the influence of corporations and technology on the city in general, on a general principle, is not being discussed, and that it should be brought up further in public commentary and community discussion, as Anne-Marie and Barry previously mentioned, although I do not think that this directly relates to 5G as a matter properly. It's a more general issue that occurs in the city regarding the involvement of technology and advertising on public streets and other similar issues. And so I see this as one instance of a broader phenomenon that needs to be addressed and not necessarily directly related to any new advancement in technology.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
David Morrison. The irony of the presentation before about the death of the birds was incredible, because it doesn't matter what steps you folks take, the rollout of 5G is going to kill many, many birds, insects, plants, and is harmful to all life itself. That is actually scientific. There is science behind that, many, many years. Now, the hiding behind the 1996 Telecommunications Act preemption is ridiculous. In Germany, there was a phrase that they used, "We're only doing what we're told." Many, many lives were lost because of that. You are only doing what you're told. However, I have some good news for you, because the states do not have to comply. There's an anti-commandeering doctrine that is long established history and constitutional law. I suggest you look it up. Sandra Day O'Connor read one of the rulings. So some things you might not know about 5G is that currently the FCC safety standards are based on thermal effects, despite thousands of studies showing otherwise. The measurement used with current microwave technology is SAR, or specific absorption rate. With 5G, they're not going to use SAR because SAR is based on the heating of tissue, and they're going to use power density, which is not based on the heating of tissue, because 5G will heat tissue. The skin has capillaries that can sometimes cool tissue, but the eyes do not. I don't know if you're aware of this, and I don't know if you're also aware that the exposure that we will be getting is about 30 times higher than the current 4G.
Thank you.
Also, throughout the industry now, they're saying...
Could I ask you to summarize your final points, please?
I'll summarize it, yeah.
Thank you.
Throughout the industry, they're saying, especially T-Mobile has been saying this, that 5G is not going to work. It's only going to be available to about 5% of the population, and they're going to be using 600...
Do you have any more testimony related to
600
this
megahertz.
ordinance? This is not a
Well,
5G
you
ordinance.
guys are being
All right, thank you.
fooled.
That is
And-
the end of public testimony. Thank you very much. Colleagues, is there any further discussion on this item?
I just would like to say that we don't have the luxury of not following the law. We promise to follow the laws of the United States.
Sir, your testimony is over. Thank you. Please have a seat. You're interrupting the commissioner. Please have a seat, or you will be asked to leave.
I share your concerns, and I think that the evidence suggests that there are health problems. We are not allowed to consider that.
Alrighty.
What's next, Mayor?
Did you have any further comments?
That's it, I'm done.
Okay, good. I just have one comment. I always enjoy the public testimony period, especially when I learn something. And I felt that this morning, Commissioner Fish, I learned a tremendous amount by the public testimony we heard related to the presentation you gave. I'm just going to tell people honestly, when you come in here and you compare us to the Nazis at Nuremberg, or you say that our objective is ultimately to subvert democracy, that is not particularly useful or helpful testimony. And it's too bad, because I thought some of the people who were testifying actually made very good points, and I wanted to have the opportunity to have the conversation. In fact, with relation to 5G, which this ordinance is not related to, this council has taken a principled leadership stance at the national level regarding public health consequences of small cell wireless deployment. Moreover, this council has taken the leadership role nationally on the question of the role of local government in terms of managing our own public right-of-ways. And so there is a lot of good work that we are doing related to the question of 5G, but this ordinance is not that. Any further discussion before I move this on? Very good. This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. My understanding is 528 was pulled by lightning. Was that correct?
Yes.
He is not here, but go ahead and read it, please.
Pay bodily injury lawsuit of Ramon McPherson in the sum of $40,000 resulting from a motor vehicle collision involving the Portland Police Bureau.
Any questions or public testimony? Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Hardest. Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. 532, please.
532, approve application under the Multiple Unit Limited Tax Exemption Program under the Inclusionary Housing Program for Willis Apartments located at 1627 North Willis Boulevard.
Great, and I will just point out again, this is now joining 59 other private sector projects in inclusionary housing. That's led to about 400 permanently affordable units within the city of Portland. Was there public testimony on this item? Who pulled it?
Lightning.
He's not here. No testimony. Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. 534, also pulled from the consent agenda.
Authorize the Director of the Bureau of Environmental Services to execute certain lease documents with BNSF Railway needed for fire suppression maintenance.
Who pulled this?
Lightning also pulled this one.
Very good. Any public testimony? Call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. Ordinance is adopted. We are adjourned till 2 p.m.